handicap accessible with a little button on the right. You just push it, and it'll open up for people like me in a wheelchair, which is what I like. When I built this, I was fantasizing, now one day sitting in the window waving at people with my drool cup, and so on and so forth. So I've never been there yet. Even though when I built the place, they made me, I am now and have been since then a lifetime member of the senior lounge, which is way before I was even a senior citizen. That was in 1982. So I guess for the general public, if there's anybody watching this, I'm about $6,000 short of the allotted 27,000. So if anybody cares to give something, just walk into the senior lounge and give it to them and or me. So I'm the bottom line, and so be it. Thank you very much for your time. I know we can't talk, so then forget it. I'm leaving. I'm going home to my wife and worship her.
Much appreciated, Mr. Austin. Much appreciated. Calling again for public comment. If you have a comment, concern, question you wish to share with the City Council, please come to the podium. You have 3 minutes, and if you would state your name and place of residence.
Good evening, council members. My name is Bo Baker. I'm an affordable housing developer working on an affordable housing opportunity in Southwest Poulsbo. We specialize in drawing state and private resources to places like Poulsbo to help pay for the infrastructure and development of affordable housing at a meaningful scale. To qualify and be competitive for these state resources, you need a local contribution from the project's municipality. The local contribution cost typically sees an 8-to-1 match of state resources that will be drawn into Poulsbo rather than be allocated somewhere else in the state. Local contributions can either be grant fundings or fee waivers. I'm here to ask the council to prioritize the consideration of fee reductions and deferrals in your proposed development incentives during tonight's session of the Housing Affordability Workshop Series. Affordable housing at scale is cost efficient, a strong economic driver, and more than offsets its local contribution costs. The sales tax revenue and economic benefit from large-scale residential development will also attract other forms of commercial and industrial development as well. If council is interested, I'm more than happy to meet and provide a boots-on-ground perspective of affordable housing development. Long story short, I'd like to urge the council to consider fee reductions for 100% deed-restricted affordable housing projects. Let's get some housing built. Thank you.
Thank you. And you've come to the right meeting with the workshop tonight. Again, calling for public comment, please come to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes, and if you would state your name and place of residence. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Steve Ruggiero. I reside in Port Gamble. I am the owner of First American Properties. We are a boutique retail brokerage firm that I founded in 1987, focused on national retail development, investment brokerage, and leasing. I'm here to echo a little bit of what Bo has brought up, and because it just goes across any part of real estate development. I've done extensive work across Puget Sound in general, Kitsap in particular, including the assemblage, entitlement, and lease up for the trails at Silverdale. And I placed all of the pieces of the puzzle into College Marketplace. Included in that was the development for the Office Max Big 5 building, which we built. And we recently re-tenanted that with both Pickleball Kingdom and Sauce Nouvelle Bistro, where I had a nice meal with Mayor Stern. I'm currently involved in 8 Poulsbo Silverdale-centric projects, including the lease-up of Eliason Square down the street for Kelly Clark. My company is based in Poulsbo. I've been a North Kitsap resident for 27 years. With that as a backdrop, I'm here to testify in support of the Poulsbo Housing Affordability Workshop series for a variety of reasons. While I bring a national retail and large format shopping center point of view to tonight's meeting, I am here to reinforce the point that it doesn't matter what facet of the industry you're in. No one can afford to build new anymore without some type of assistance. It's not just labor, not just materials or a limited supply of properly zoned land. It is regulation piled upon regulation from local to state to federal agency. Believe me, they all add up. Housing crisis has only worsened over the last few years. All across Puget Sound, and Poulsbo has not been immune to its effects. I would urge the council to focus on and prioritize fee reductions and deferrals for deed-restricted, affordable housing developments. Why? Because I don't want to see the city of Poulsbo and this community turn into another community in Puget Sound or up and down the west where the people that work there can't afford to live there. And that needs to change. Otherwise, you'll just have more and more people buying expensive places, and the low people, I shouldn't say low people, what I was trying to say is if you're lower on the economic spectrum, you're going to have a very difficult time living in that community. And, you know, that adds character to community and occasionally a character or two. The public and economic benefit that affordable housing provides to a community is shown to be more than enough to offset its cost. Benefits include infrastructure upgrades, sales tax revenue from large-scale developments, and residents that save hundreds of dollars a month that can be used to spur their own economic growth within a community. So as you review the Housing Affordable Workshop series tonight, I urge the council to vote yes for fee reductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ruggiero. And again, to clarify, he and his firm, First American, were key players in the original college marketplace development over 25 years ago. So I'm calling for public comment again. If you have a question, concern, thought to share with the council, if you would do us the favor of coming to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes. And if you would state your name and place of residence, we'd appreciate it. So calling for public comment tonight. And not seeing, go ahead, sir.
I am very excited to be here tonight. I've never presented anything to a group like this. The only time has been at traffic court, so I'm a little nervous. My name is Phil Herzog, and I've lived in the Port Gamble, Kitsap, Poulsbo area for since 2001. We moved from Texas. Prior to that, I lived in Los Angeles and New York. I'm the vice president of market development for EJO electric bikes. I've been a consultant to the International Light Electric Vehicle Association for years, presenter there. And I have, I'm the CEO and founder of thetrailmasters.com, which is a social network for men. We do service projects like habitat restoration on the for steelhead and salmon on the Olympic Peninsula rivers, and we donate money for that. We're in the process, but we put it on hold. A fundraising initiative to raise $5,000 for trail maintenance for the Port Gamble trails. I'm here to talk about just introducing the exploration of an electric bike rental program in this area. My number one target is the Kingston Ferry. My number two target is Bainbridge Ferry. My number three target is the Port Gamble Trailhead at Stottlemyre. And my number four target is somewhere in Poulsbo. I don't know. That's probably the last one we'd want to test. And we want to start out really, really modestly with basically 4 bikes at a time. I want to process this with the right group. I don't know who that is. I want to explore it. If there isn't 100% consensus, I would urge you to shut down electric bikes anywhere in this town. And the only reason I say that is that electric bikes are hugely controversial around the country. All you have to do is do a Google search and find out how one lawsuit has cost cities millions of dollars and created all kinds of bad press for electric bikes, and has created legislation both in New York and New Hampshire and now New Jersey and probably Washington State that's going to require every bicyclist that has a motor on it to have insurance, to have a registration, to go through a training program, and that would be a mess. So the idea is self-policing. I think that my organization, Trail Masters, where we're giving the money away completely to both trail maintenance, the Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance through Eddie Espinosa and Nick Mavick, the president of the local chapter, and the guys on the trails there, give all the money away to them, and then use the Mission House guys that are going through a recovery program to be the guys that administer the program. They would get the other half of the money. I would get nothing. I'm a retired guy. I got a lot of other stuff going on, a podcast, and let me just say that I love this town. I have lobbied for it. I have tried to get Sunset Magazine and other places to do little stories, which is a stupid idea.
Thank you. See if
So,
we could wrap
Yeah,
up.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asai. Again, calling for public comment. If you would come to the podium, state your name. There will be a second period of public comment at the end of the meeting for those who would like to still address the council if you're there at that late hour. But again, I'm calling for public comment at this time at the top of the meeting. If you have something to share, please come to the podium. Not seeing any, we're going to move on with the agenda, and the next is mayor's report and council comments, and I'm going to get in front of that because we have two proclamations tonight before we go around the table, and I'm going to share those. The first one is going to involve the proclamation of the Day of the Sami people, and we have a special honor and treat tonight. At the end of that proclamation, I'll be calling Michelle Wasson to the podium to share personal family history to better explore and appreciate this proclamation. I will now at this time read that proclamation. Whereas the city of Poulsbo recognizes that in order to fully honor and embrace its rich Scandinavian history and traditions, it is necessary to recognize the history, traditions, customs, and culture of the indigenous people from whence they came. And whereas the Sami people are the indigenous people of Sapmi, which today encompasses large parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the Murmansk Oblast of Russia, and the Sami people have lived on those lands since time immemorial. And whereas the Sami people in recent history have begun to enjoy a positive relationship with the colonizing governments, I'll repeat, the colonizing governments of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. But despite these relationships, there are disparities in the fair treatment of the Sami people, as well as ongoing prejudice, discrimination, and violations of indigenous rights. And there is insufficient acknowledgement of the historical destruction of their culture. And whereas the city of Poulsbo values the many contributions the Sami people have made to the communities of our ancestors with their knowledge, their labor, technology, science, philosophy, arts, and the deep cultural influences which have helped shape the character of our city. And whereas on February 6, 1917, the first Sami Congress was held in Trondheim, Norway, and in 1992 at the 15th Sami Conference in Helsinki, Finland, a resolution was passed that the Day of the Sami people should be celebrated on this day. And whereas the city of Poulsbo joins Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia in recognizing the 6th of February as the Day of the Sami people, creating an opportunity to promote tolerance, understanding, appreciation, and friendship amongst all people. Now, therefore, I, Edward Stern, Mayor of the City of Poulsbo, Washington, do hereby proclaim February 6th, 2026 as the Day of the Sami people, and call upon the citizens of Poulsbo and the surrounding area to observe the occasion with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. And in light of that, we will commence now with the first of those appreciations. If I could call upon Michelle Wasson to address us on the question of the Sami Day and its people.
Thank you, Mayor Stern, for that. My maiden name is Nilsson, so some of you know that from around here. So Watson's my former married name, but we keep it. So my story begins back in Karasuk and Katakeno, which is up in the Arctic Circle. this picture right here is a picture of let's put that, we did that way, perfect. My great-grandmother, Merritt, she went by Marie, and her parents, Anders and Merritt Balto. This is when they landed in Alaska, when they came to bring reindeer to North America. So this is rather special. Not many immigrants get a nice little 8x10 taken by the American government. So this is a treasured piece in our family history. Behind me, I have some poster boards that I made about 20 years ago about my family story, the Nilsons and the Baltos, and then a number of other Sami families that came here to settle in Kitsap County and specifically in Poulsbo, Kingston, and Eglong. Those are going to be able to be on display for the next couple of weeks, or people to come in and take a look at those. So I had to dig them out of the back of the closet, and I found them, and I was just happy to see that they were still intact. My story, like I was talking about, begins in 1898, when hundreds of Sami people were recruited to bring reindeer to Alaska. The feeling is that there was not enough food, and the gold rush was kind of starting, but not quite yet. And they didn't know what they were going to feed all these people that were up there. And so someone got the bright idea, well, why don't we bring some reindeer and we could do that? So they had a expedition in 1894, which was somewhat successful, but they changed a few things in 1898. And my grandparents, my great-great-grandparents and my great-grandmother came. They had another daughter that was too young to travel, so she stayed back. And then my Anders, my great-great-grandfather's brother, is Samuel Balto. And I think you've all heard of the story of Balto the dog, correct? You know, taking the diphtheria flu vaccine. So that is named after about Samuel Balto. He was a great explorer and actually went across Greenland with Fridtjof Nansen in 1888. So he's one of the first people to walk across Greenland. They skied across it. So he was ready for another adventure. He came back to Norway, and then they all got in these steamer ships. They all sawed up all the antlers of the reindeer. There's about 500 of them.
Michelle, can I ask a question? Can you repeat the name of the dog and that delivery of the flu vaccine?
Oh, it was Balto, and so he was one of the dogs that brought the dogs that brought through the they had a flu epidemic. I think it was diphtheria, so they brought the vaccines. And there's that movie, and there was a lot of dogs there.
It was watched by newspapers and avidly.
Yes, and now it's called the Iditarod race.
There we are.
So now it's called the Iditarod race. So that's what that was. There was many other dogs, but he was the one of the gentlemen was good friends with Samuel, so that's why they named a dog Balto.
So that was called out last night. My wife and I were watching the Westminster Dog Show, American Kennel Club. It was on for 2 nights on Prime TV, and that was cited.
Oh, they cited Balto?
Yes.
Yeah, they do have a statue of Balto in Central Park, and I've been to see him a couple of times, so it's pretty fun to have that as part of your background. So they all got in the ships. They sawed off the reindeer horns, obviously, because it's a little bit dangerous. Came through New Jersey, and then they all got on trains to take them across the United States. When they got about halfway in there, because we don't know what we're doing as white people, they took all of the lichen, the food for the reindeer, and thought it was just garbage. Got rid of it off of the trains. So that's not a good thing. So they started to get sicker, and by the time they got to Seattle at Woodland Park Zoo, and there are pictures of them getting off and walking up Fremont to Woodland Park Zoo, bringing the reindeer there. They were really in some trouble, so they needed to get some lichen, but there's no lichen around here. You have to get up a little bit more Arctic to get to that. So after they all were at Woodland Park Zoo, then they went up to Fort Townsend, which is Port Townsend now, stayed there for a little bit until it was time to get in boats again, and went all the way up to Alaska. The men and the reindeer went up first. The women stayed there. Then they all got up there. I think by the time they got up there, the 500 reindeer were down to like 100 and something reindeer because of the lichen problem. So they all went into the mountains to try to get some more lichen to try to do that. Within a couple of years, though, the herd was huge. So, it was a success that way. A lot of times after they got there, they got gold fever and went down to Nome for the gold rush. So my great grandmother and they were all in the gold rush. Unfortunately, my great grandfather was killed in a mining accident, and so they were now without a money or anything like that. So they depended on the kindness of other people who were Samis. And my great great grandmother married Caspar Hahn, who had a farm on Eglon. And so that's how we got back down here. And then word got out to the rest of the Samis, hey, a little bit nicer weather, we can farm, we can do some things, come on down to Kitsap County area. And so that's why there's an awful lot of Samis here. And Ed, when you were talking about discrimination, my grandmother and none of them wanted to ever be known as they were Sami because such incredible discrimination. The only reason why this all happened is you take Washington State history, and I admit this is my project. And I believe in 1981. And so I started doing all of this. And of course, back then it was encyclopedias and all sorts of things. Now you just pop things up and a lot of this shows up. But the legacy of the determination, these guys came from nothing and worked hard. My great grandmother, I never really heard anything about her. About any of this that she did. I mean, here she is, this sweet little lady living at the Ebenezer. And you would have never known she had this incredible experience. And I was looking at my notes here, and there's an estimated 30,000 people of Sami descent that live in North America. And there's quite a lot of people here in this area, but they're kind of dying off. So my father's 82 and I'm 60. So to try to keep this alive, I thank you for bringing this to everyone's attention.
What I'd like to do is take a moment and go down to the podium and present Michelle Wasson, born Michelle Nielsen, with the proclamation itself. And then I think we also have a quick recognition of the new Miss Poulsbo we can do.
You bet. Thanks, Ed.
Firstly, it's my honor on behalf of the City Council to present the original copy of the
Thank you.
proclamation. And if you would share this with the family and our great appreciation. And for those of you that are not that familiar with Little Norway, realize that this is a very authentic place. This is not a tourist town with a theme. This is the real McCoy. And Michelle speaks to that and shares it with such authenticity. We thank you.
Thank you so much.
And if you would do us the honor, and I'll preface by saying both City Administrator Rob Gelder and I were at the Miss Poulsbo pageant
Yes.
last Saturday.
I'm going to be director and take photos, so right ahead.
Mr. Gelder can be called Judge Gelder. He was one of a panel. I was simply there sitting next to Bruce and Linda Nielsen. Thank you for that. And they had a special theme with a lot of contestants called Pop Art. You did a fantastic job. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Madison, who is our new Miss Poulsbo, and I'll allow her to introduce herself. But first, it's my privilege to pin her with the official pin for some 20 years as a city councilman liaison to the Chamber of Commerce. I attended the luncheons and I was able to put on their bunad the city pin. So it's my privilege, Madison, to do this for you.
Do a quick photo, Ed. You look dignified now. Your hair.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you so much.
If you would share a few words with us, Madison. I present to you the new Miss Poulsbo.
Hi, my name is Madison Colston. I'm a 17-year-old senior at Olympic High School, and I'm very excited to be the next Miss Poulsbo, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you.
And if everyone would bear with me, there's one other proclamation that we need to acknowledge tonight. I had the honor representing the city council in the city of Poulsbo and portions of the north end of the county at the Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration that was hosted by Kitsap County. And this is in regards to that proclamation. Whereas Black History Month is observed annually in February to honor the rich history, culture, and achievements of Black Americans whose contributions have profoundly shaped our nation, strengthened our communities, and advanced the ongoing pursuit of justice and equality. And whereas Black History Month traces its origins to 1926, when Dr. Carter G. Woodson established Negro History Week, laying the foundation for a century of Black history commemorations that continue to educate, inspire, and empower. And whereas the 2026 national theme for Black History Month, A Century of Black History Commemorations, recognizes the 100 years of collective efforts to preserve, celebrate, and elevate Black history, achievements, and lived experiences. And whereas the centennial milestone invites reflection on the progress achieved, the challenges that remain, and the enduring legacy of Black leadership, resilience, creativity, and advocacy across generations. Whereas Black Americans have made extraordinary contributions in every sector of our society, including education, science, healthcare, business, public service, the arts, and civil rights movement, certainly, often in the face of systemic barriers and injustice. Whereas we honor the contributions of Black residents who have enriched our community through their leadership, service, and cultural contributions. And whereas to those interested in learning more about the origins of Black History Month and this year's theme, visit the Association for the Study of African American Life and History's website. I, therefore, Edward Stern, Mayor of the City of Poulsbo, Washington, do hereby proclaim February 2026 as Black History Month and encourage everyone to observe the month by acknowledging the history and challenges faced by Black Americans and paying tribute to this community for its strength, perseverance, character, and contributions, all of which enrich our city of Poulsbo. And I enjoin you all to join me in recognizing that. And thank you. We're going to move on now to council comments, and I'm going to start to my left with Councilman Doug Newell. No comment. Councilwoman Crowe.
I just wanted to share, it was wonderful to hear about some of the history of the Sami people, especially from such a personal perspective. I also want to highlight, if anyone really wants to know about African American Black history in Kitsap County, the Kitsap Museum has a wonderful website that you can actually access and look at a lot of historical figures. Some I actually had the privilege of being in the presence of and really not appreciate during that time. A lot of wonderful people that helped to change the trajectory of race for all colors in Kitsap County. So it's a great website that they've curated and put together, a wonderful deep dive. And I encourage you to explore what has occurred right here in our own county.
Thank you, Councilwoman Crowe. Mr. Eckert.
Our gentleman that made public comment about the electric bikes, she'd stuck around for just a minute. There is actually legislation this session already on that issue. So he had said it's come, it could come. Well, it's already here. I know Mercer Island was the ones behind asking for it. They're having a lot of issues with e-bikes with basically kids who have ones that are not your basic models. They're the much higher performance ones and having issues on their island. So it's already being looked at. Other than that, I just say, and since our last meeting, it's kind of been a heavy H3 department time. We had our ribbon cutting at the Recovery Cafe, which was amazing. And so honor to them. And if you have any doubt about how that goes and what that's about and the benefit, all you had to do is look at Summer's face while one of the clients was speaking, one of the members, and her face told the story. It was unbelievable. So, and other than that, just great work to the folks that were on Kim's ad hoc about affordable housing. That was a great report. I had a chance to sit down with Kim and ask some questions about it and talk about it. And yeah, it was great work. So continuing great work from our newest department.
Great, thank you. I'm glad you pointed that out. We're very proud of our Recovery Resource Center, the work of staff, and all the departments supporting that effort that Kim Hendrickson heads up. Turning to my right, Mr. Tabor.
No update for me.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome public. I just wanted to say thanks to Bill Austin for shepherding the remodel on the senior center. And I'm hopeful that he finds the rest of the support he needs to complete that, because that's a long overdue improvement to make sure that that place is fully accessible for all types of mobility. I wanted to thank Bo and Steve for their comments about the upcoming affordable housing workshop and the decisions that are going to be before the council. We are committed to finding the best path forward for affordable housing, so it's very helpful to have your perspective. Thank you. And lastly, I wanted to echo Councilmember Eckert's comments about the Recovery Cafe. That's a real testament to the city's commitment to all the people, and the stories that we heard there and the celebration and just the unified city commitments to making sure that people who need help have it was really heartwarming to see. And I hope it's a reminder of what we can achieve when we work together. Thank you.
You're here, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Councilwoman Livedall.
I have nothing to add at this time.
Thank you. Councilman McVeigh.
Thank you. Just want to recognize and thank everybody who addressed us this evening as part of citizen comments. Congratulations to our new Miss Poulsbo, and I look forward to tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McVeigh. I'm going to add one statement under my own mayor report rather than just the proclamations. There was a common theme tonight, and that is honoring other races, ethnicities, cultures, and communities. We also have in the Poulsbo the largest proportional residing population of Hispanic and Latino in the county. There are larger numbers elsewhere, but in relation to the size of our community, we have that. At the urging of members of the city council, I made a statement in cooperation with the police department last week, reissued the statement. It was on the record. It was reported coincidentally with a statement that was issued by the mayor of the city of Port Orchard. In essence, and it was issued in Spanish to that community specifically, with the great leadership and assistance of our police chief, Ron Harding. And I'm going to read the essence of what we issued. And it's in regards to the immigration federal enforcement actions that we're all aware of and have heard about throughout the United States. This is specific to Poulsbo. We will not ask your immigration status and are not authorized, referring to police, to detain an individual based solely on their immigration status, not to be confused with anyone engaged in criminal activity. Absolutely. We do not investigate immigration violations, and we are not permitted to share personal information with immigration agents. That statement was made loud and clear last week. It was widely disseminated and is part of the celebration of all of our various communities that comprise our city of Poulsbo. And I wanted to share that that went out in case you had not. I think it was forwarded to all of you by myself as well. We're going to now continue with the agenda, board, commission, and outside agency reports. Again, I'll start with Mr. Newell to my left. Nothing to report. Ms. Crowe, Mr. Eckert, Mr. Tabor, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Councilwoman Livedall.
Yeah, just briefly. The HTPA had its annual board retreat. We went over lots of stuff. I won't try and hash that out, but we had some swapping around of roles, and hopefully that suits everyone. But for now, we have a full board, all the seats filled, which is really, really nice. Everyone's working very well together. But we have some big goals for just reaching membership, business owners, employees, and getting better attendance at the meetings and more involvement. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Councilman McVeigh.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
I'll keep this extra brief, even though yesterday was extra long. It's what's been traditionally recently referred to as Super Tuesday, which is the meeting of all the county various boards and commissions in sequence, so that those of us who are on those boards can try to consolidate the majority of the activity into one day. And that includes the Board of the Health District, Kitsap Transit, CENTCOM, 911. There was no Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council this month. That's myself and Mr. McVeigh. I think the only item I'll report out to again is one I touched on a month ago, and that was the Health District, that the measles outbreak is reaching recent historic numbers to our neighbors to the east, Pierce, King, and Snohomish counties. The numbers are rising rapidly. There's none reported yet in Kitsap County, but since measles remains the most virulent disease and fast spreading of all of the endemic illnesses, it is something we want to be keenly aware of. Lying at the root of it is the drop in inoculation and vaccination rates. We're hoping to step that up again. We're fighting a headwind of misinformation and rumor, and we're seeing the result of that right now. The good news is there is no reported cases in Kitsap. The bad news is King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties are having rapidly rising levels, and so the public needs to be aware of that. On that note, I'm going to turn to...
Excuse me, Mayor.
Oh,
Can I?
Councilwoman Livedall.
Yeah, as someone with a very small child, I just want to also make it clear that the measles outbreak is entirely preventable.
And it's just a very scary thing that something that was nearing complete removal from the medical health fields is surging, not only where we heard about it in other areas of the United States, but right here in the greater Seattle metro area. Let's hope it can be arrested. Let's hope that the peninsulas stay free of it. And you're right, Councilwoman Livedall, and it's particularly dangerous for pregnant women, extremely so. Anything anyone wants to add, Mr. McVeigh or anyone? I'm going to turn then to our city administrator and department head comments, starting with Mr. Gelder.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things on parking, because nobody's talked about that yet, and I figured we need to have a parking discussion. But to that end, we are continuing with our parking open house. Our next one will be on Friday the 13th. It'll be a great day to talk about parking. Don't worry about the date. That is scheduled for 9 a.m. And thanks to our chief as well as a planning director, we are going to mix it up a little bit. So we have scheduled, and we're going to try an evening open house on Monday, the 2nd of March from 6 to 7 p.m. here in Chambers. So thank you both for putting heads together and comparing calendars and making that happen. So we'll be getting more word out. We'll definitely announce it on the open house next week. For those of you who recall and appreciate the support in actually creating a day pass option for when we have larger events coming to town, we did finally receive the proceeds from LAS for the Yule Fest. I think I gave the numbers where we had like 110 people that actually utilized the program that weekend, but we received nets the processing about $881. For Yule Fest. The Lutefisk dinner, we did do that. We rolled it out again for Saturday, and we had 33 individuals take advantage of that. Definitely a much smaller event, but more importantly, we had 32 volunteers that were pulled into that were working long hours and didn't have to worry about a citation. And so next, really, we will deploy that on the 2-day Poulsbo Blues and Jazz Festival coming up at the end of the month on the 27th, 28th. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions from council for City Administrator Gelder? Mr. Eckert.
Yeah, no, I just want to know, I mean, the dollar amounts are great, but I just, for the general public, all the comments and concerns and fears of, as soon as we start doing these things, we're going to kill the downtown and drive everybody away. This has never been one, we set something in stone and we weren't going to, that was it. It was always going to be, we're going to continually revisit what we're doing, how it's working, come up with new ways. This is a perfect example of as soon as we started enforcement, something was identified as we needed to make an allowance. Staff came up with a great way to do it, and it's working. So just keep in mind, it's never our intent to, ruin the downtown or be draconian. It's simply trying to come up with a way forward, and that way is going to take a lot of different paths. And thank you for doing this, Heather, Rob, and everybody involved.
Mr. Tabor.
So when there's an event, they can approach the city and get this extended parking to pay for it so that they don't get tickets, right? So if we did that all the time,
Yeah.
what would we call it? That's all.
That's a rhetorical question, correct? Okay, thank you.
Any other comment for Mr. Gelder? Thank you, Rob, for your report. And now turning to Finance Director Debbie Boer.
Good evening. A couple of things to report. First, I'll start with the little bit more difficult news. Your utility billings were mailed out the first of the month, and they do have your new rates implemented, the cost of living, as well as the increase in your solid waste rate. We have a quick question and answer posted on the city website under the Finance Department Utilities, which links there. And also welcome to call us if the questions aren't answered. And if they get into more specifics, we have a resource for that as well. So letting citizens know that that has come out and effective now. And then moving on to some very exciting news. We've been pretty busy since our last council. We went through our bond rating for our upcoming debt issue, and the city upheld the AA rating, which is a very strong rating for a city our size. They quoted, our practices. They quoted our strong reserves and our policies in-house, as well as our strong economy. So that's something to be very proud of, that you as a council and the citizens have built to make Poulsbo such a sustainable city and a place desirable to be. And then this morning, we actually put the bonds out on the market. So that's even better news is the interest rates come in. We went out on a very favorable market at the right date and time. And so we came out with bonds coming in about a 3.75% interest, which is much less than we anticipated. It's much less than what your bond ordinance called for. We also did our refunding bonds, and those saved about, over the remaining length of the term, about $139,000 in savings for investment payments. So we were very productive today and in the last couple of weeks. So that's good news to all of us. We will be receiving the proceeds about the February 20th, and those will be first to pay for some of our projects, and then put aside the funds for your public event and recreation center. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, but we've done very well.
So allow me to add, City Administrator Gelder and the department heads had their retreat last week. And in the course of that retreat, Standard & Poor's out of New York, the field office in Colorado, issued their evaluation of the city of Poulsbo. And we received the highest rating of a small city of our size in the state of Washington. And that is a tremendous achievement that should be recognized publicly, but more so for our staff and for good council policy, for present, past mayors. It was a team effort to achieve that. And the stated interest rate is no small function of that rating, let alone market conditions. So I would ask you all to join me in a round of applause for our fantastic staff. literally an outstanding achievement that saves our taxpayers and citizens millions of dollars because of that effort, that discipline, and that rigor. And so we thank all of you, and especially our finance director, Debbie Boer, has been hard at work for the better part of 30 years to see us in this condition. Thank you, Deb.
You're welcome.
Turning
Team
to,
effort.
go
Thank you.
ahead, Debbie.
Oh, I just to say it's a team effort, so I appreciate everybody
Right.
that participates. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning to our city engineer, Josh Rains.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. Just a couple quick announcements, particularly regarding our Knoll Road project. I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that the intersection of Knoll and Messford, there's a significant amount of work that's started there to actually start to form the roundabout that's coming. So they just temporarily signed it and have put some cones in there to actually treat it as a roundabout as they start to form the middle island. So as you approach that intersection, try not to be surprised. It is actually functioning as a roundabout now. So try to pay attention to that as you're approaching it. Use it as a roundabout and go to the right, follow it around.
Josh, that's a great heads up. So that is at the very end of Messford. That parallels the football field and athletic fields at the high school. And if you go all the way up Messford past the Mormon church, and it's an intersection, we're punching a road through, widening on Languinette. And so that is to be treated now as a roundabout. It is immediately adjacent to Morrow Manor Park. And so we would ask you not only to watch out for children, but watch out for other vehicles in this temporary roundabout that soon will be permanent. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, thank you. And we have received some concerns from some citizens about school drop-off time. So we've been working pretty closely with our contractor to try to adjust some of the traffic control measures and work that's happening during those peak times in the morning and the afternoon. So we do hear it and we are trying to work with them. Speaking of Languinette, we did recently just officially rename Languinette and the whole section all the way through to Lincoln as Languinette Avenue Northeast. So notices did go out to the residents there along that strip that are affected last week. So they should all have that in their mail now, and it's been officially changed on the map. So just a heads up. And then we're working on our middle section design of Knoll Road, which is the section from Hostmark to the Messford roundabout that we were just talking about. We're about 60%, so it's about time for us to hold another open house to the public. We are getting ready to start the right-of-way phase for that. We are looking at about 7 property owners that have temporary construction easement needs. So we have currently scheduled on March 3rd at 5 p.m. here in Chambers, an open house to talk about the design and where it's at, answer any questions that anybody might have. So we'll be posting that on our social media as well as our website, project website, things like that coming up. And then the last thing I had was just the perk, just a quick update. We are right at the finish line of design. So we are on schedule to advertise the project on Monday next week. So if you know any contractors, tell them to be looking out for that.
They are. We may be at the finish line of the design, but we're just at the beginning of the funding to get the darn thing done. Am I right, Debbie? As far as the Knoll Road project, which again, clarify, the big roundabout south of town as you're heading for Bainbridge Island is the beginning point for this project. This is a phased project. It's very large. This is the final phase 3 punching through to Lincoln and effectively provides access to all those new subdivisions that have been built the last few years, provides access to the schools, and provides some relief for other avenues that have been used to transport all that traffic and buses. And I can attest to the amount of activity because today alone I had to sign 5 different contractual agreements and amendments and paperwork. So my electronic signature got quite the workout, Josh, on one day alone. Parks Director, Jeff Osmick.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening, community members. First and most important, it is my greatest pleasure to introduce our brand new special event coordinator, and I'd like to invite her up so she can introduce herself. And this is Emily Haish. Oh, here we go. Hashi.
It's Hasha. I know. I'm sorry. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm Emily Hasha. I'm a resident here in Poulsbo. I am a longtime Parks and Rec family customer. My kids have been coming to Parks and Rec since they were very small, and I am thrilled to be joining the team to help make our special events even more special and to serve our community. So just excited to be here, meet you all, and work together. Thank you.
We welcome you to Poulsbo. Welcome to Poulsbo and joining the team you just heard about. You're joining a top-notch team. Credit to you. And we all look forward to meeting you individually and supporting you in your activities to support our community being the best leading edge event in the county. So thank you and congratulations.
And we're putting Emily right in the presentation tonight with me. We're full of good news. January has been very busy, so I have a few updates I'd like to share with you. First, Rachel Cornett, our Parks Coordinator, has been nominated for Volunteer of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce. So at their gala this Saturday, her and along with a few others who have been nominated, we will find out who the big winner is, and we're just thrilled. She has done a phenomenal job for our community. Park assessments have started, so we're making rounds, taking a look at how our parks are doing, what needs to be improved. And then in for January, we've had over 115 recreation classes so far. That's over 2,600 rec hours of participants. So there is a demand. We're thrilled to be serving families, adults, seniors, anybody in the community and outside the community. On that note, we do have a partnership with Pickleball Kingdom, and we're working on after-school programs, after schools. And that's a pilot program that's just launched this month in January. And then we also are partnering with Kitsap Humane Society to do once a month free programming. So last month was about kitten foster care, and it was completely packed with people. So it's just really neat working with different partnerships of groups in our community. And then to our senior programs has stepped in today. And if you have a chance on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or when our free fitness programs are, lifelong fitness, we have 45 people. And I wanted to share a very short quote. This fitness program builds my strength and confidence to make my routine to exercise daily. These are folks who are building these programs, making connections. It's fantastic. And then lastly, we heard from Bill Austin earlier about how the North Kitsap Senior Citizen Center is undergoing some renovations, so they won't be able to get inside. They're a core partner of the cities. We work together on our Senior Connections newsletter. We are working with them right now so they can have a temporary relocation, meet our participants, and be at the rec center for the upcoming months. So we're still coordinating those dates, but we're in close communication pretty much.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'll tag on. City Administrator Geller and I represented the city at City Manager Blair King of the City of Bainbridge Island's retirement last week. And I was stopped. I think, Mr. Gelder, you might have heard it too. The word of your senior program has reached Bainbridge Island. The coordination with the private senior organization coupled with the Parks Department. I had a number of inquiries, couldn't answer them in depth, but told them of the success. You'll be hearing from folks on Bainbridge Island. So kudos to you, Jeff. City Planner Heather Wright, who we look forward to hearing a great deal from during the study workshop.
Real quick, I'll just say the other great kitchen that we built in the city, if you haven't seen it, is the one at the rec center. So pop over and see it. The kitchen there has turned out very, very, very nice.
Absolutely. Any other comment from council? Mr. McVeigh, I don't want to overlook anyone. We're all good. Turning back to City Planner and Economic Development Director Heather Wright.
Thank you, Mayor Stern. Good evening, council members of the public. I'm going to share with you a little bit of news for next week's agenda, but just give you a sneak preview. We came to you in last August about a caretaker's unit being constructed at Rad Park in a partnership with the KBA. And I'm excited to share that that is moving forward, that we have Habitat for Humanity that has jumped on board to manage the volunteer and the construction activity. And we are excited to bring to you the memorandum of understanding. And hopefully we can break ground, assuming that we're all in support as early as March. And there might be a 6-month timeline because Jake can do amazing things at Habitat. So, and KBA is going to be a fantastic partner. So look forward to that. Next week will be an MOU about that presented from Diane. I also wanted to share that for tonight's presentation, you've been asked to download a QR code. So I'm going to ask at your break, if you haven't done that, to go ahead and do that. You'll be looking at the programs and incentives and giving us indication if you're interested in pursuing them more for our third and fourth workshop. So if you haven't done that, if you could, that'd be great. And then just to build on the retreat bandwagon, our team had a retreat today or yesterday actually at the port of Poulsbo. They opened up their facility for us, and it was a good time for us to plan for the year ahead. And I'll report back to you all some of the things we're doing as we solidify them. One of which is just getting out more into the community and making ourselves more accessible and available. And then also we had a fantastic retreat a week ago, and we got to join at Pickleball Kingdom, which was a lot of fun. So thank you to our city administrator for putting a retreat together for our entire leadership team. That was a new thing since I've been here. And lastly, we were able to orient new councilman member Fitzpatrick this afternoon. So our whole team got to spend a few hours getting to know each other and going over land use planning for the city of Poulsbo. So it's been a great first week of February. Thank you.
Any questions for our city planner, Mr. McVeigh, or anyone at the dais? Want to be careful I don't overlook anyone. We're going to turn now to our police chief, Ron Harding. Welcome tonight, chief.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to update council on a program that we have now fully implemented that I spoke about a month ago, pre-arrest diversion program. The officers now have the tools in their hands. This was in cooperation with the Recovery Resource Center, our municipal court, and the Kitsap County Prosecutor's Office. And we've had our first successful clients that took advantage of that offer. A couple that could have been arrested, they were given the opportunity to, instead of being arrested, become members at the Resource Center. And they took that chance and they showed up just as they were supposed to, and they're now members and receiving services. So we're very happy with that. We hope to continue it.
The high level of cooperation across departments, willingness to participate, stretch, develop new policies and procedures is well recognized. I believe we're at the leading edge of this on that particular program, and I'm very excited on behalf of the City Council to you and the others that have initiated that program. Our hats off to you, Chief. Thank you. We're going to turn across the room to our city clerk, Rhiannon Fernandez, who is handing the ball deftly over to our information and technology director, Brooks Rendell.
Good evening, Council. Just a quick update on Poulsbo.gov. It's starting to get out there with new employees, et cetera, and new council members ending their email address at Poulsbo.gov. We are officially migrating the website from cityofpoulsbo.com to Poulsbo.gov on February 27th. And we'll notice out accordingly, but the key here is cityofpoulsbo.com is never going away. It will always redirect to Poulsbo.gov. And we'll be scheduling the default email addresses for all the rest of us soon as well. That's all I have.
Appreciate all the hard work of your department, including the fixes and patches and catching hackers that you do as a daily routine, Brooks. Thank you, and Maurice as well. Not seeing any other comment from council or question, we're going to move on. And the next item is the consent agenda. I am loath to say the word streamlining because the last time we did, realizing that streamlining means new processes, we got a little afoul. But what we're going to do is remove item C under council rules of procedure just for the purpose of reviewing Mr. Fitzpatrick's ideas on streamlining. So by removing that, we're going to be looking at accepting items 8A, B, D, E, F, G. And unless someone else wants to pull from that, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as referenced.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as referenced.
Second?
Second.
And we have a second. I'm not, we're going to go down the list because that's the way we do it. We're going to start with Mr. Newell.
Newell, aye.
Crow, aye.
Beckert, aye.
Tabor, aye.
Fitzpatrick, aye.
Lived aye.
Mr. McVeigh?
McVeigh, aye.
We have approved the consent agenda. We're going to move on to the business agenda now. It's in your packet. The first item is going to be Parks and Recreation Commission appointment. And Parks Director Jeff Osmick will lead us on that. And then 9B will be the council rules of procedure that we just pulled from the consent agenda. Jeff?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually going to take this on for you tonight. The mayor has appointed the following commission member and seeks council concurrence. It's the Parks and Rec Commission, and this is Aaron Devato for an appointment of a vacated position with the term expiring December 31st, 2028. And with that, I'll hand it over to you.
So before I invite our upcoming park commissioner, Aaron Devoto, to come to the podium and introduce herself personally, I'd like you to know that she's a woman of high achievement. At the city of Kirkland, she was the Deputy Public Works Director. For the city of Seattle, she was Chief Technology Officer. I'm reading from her resume. She developed and implemented successful public outreach strategies for these major cities with public and provided oversight for over 1,000 public meetings involving over 15,000 Seattle residents, built the organization to implement 2 major levy-funded capital development programs and major maintenance program at the city of Seattle totaling over $200 million, led the strategic planning efforts, reported to a variety of citizen advisory groups, including the Pro Parks Oversight Committee, the Parks Board, and the South Lake Union Advisory Board to ensure public input was included. We're highly appreciative of the skill set you bring, and if I could invite Erin Devoto to the podium to introduce herself.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. I have lived here in the area for about 10 years. I just moved to within city limits 3 months ago, but I have watched what the city has done, and I do have extensive experience with parks departments, and I really hope that my experience can be a resource. I have taken classes already at the community center. I have met the commission, and I'm just going to say you have an awesome, awesome department, and I'm going to try to keep up with Jeff. It's going to be hard, but thank you, and thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
We're privileged to have you apply, Erin. On that note, if there's any question from council, otherwise I'd be happy to entertain a motion for that appointment.
Mr. Eckert, I'd be happy to make a motion. There's no questions. Move to confirm the mayor's appointment to the Parks and Recreation Commission as presented.
And a second?
Second.
A second from Councilwoman Livedall. Any questions? And not seeing any, I'm going to be very happy to call for this vote, starting with Mr. Newell to my left.
No, aye.
Crow, aye.
Eckert, aye.
Tabor, aye. Fitzpatrick, aye.
Livedall, aye.
Mr. McVeigh.
McVeigh, aye.
Please join me in welcoming Aaron Devoto to our commission. Turning this on. We have the item that we pulled from the consent agenda, and that is the rules of procedure. And just a tiny bit of background separate from the points Mr. Fitzpatrick wishes to review with us. And that is about 10 years ago, we at the council, in cooperation with an election cycle, so that's every 2 years, decided that an orientation of our current rules of procedure, the policies of the council were in order to make sure we're all on the same page. In the course of that, it's become a biannual review. I'm not sure that was fully intended, but what a way to keep things fresh. So that's the history on pulling this every 2 years at the top of that second year. And on that note, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fitzpatrick, who asked for it to be pulled from the consent agenda.
Mayor, I wanted to propose a couple amendments for consideration, and to do that, I believe to have a motion to approve the rules and procedures, at which time I'd be happy to offer my amendments. Motion to approve the rules and procedures.
Second. We have a motion and a second on the table. Any question thereof?
So I would like to propose a couple amendments. I'd like to do them individually because I think the first one is more straightforward and simple. The second one might be more controversial. So the first is just kind of simplifying our agenda. I noticed that on our workshop portion of our agenda, that we typically end the agenda with questions and concerns of the council, followed by future agenda items. Then we have continued public comment, and then we have mayor and council member comments. And I was going to propose, instead of having two separate items for council member and mayor comments, just collapsing those into one at the end of the meeting. So we would have our workshop agenda, then we would open it for public comment, and then we would close with mayor comments, council member comments, and future agenda items. That way there's just one simple period at the end of the meeting, and that's it. That is my proposed amendment.
Questions for Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Go ahead. A couple issues. One's just kind of holistically, it's great that we can have conversations, and we have a couple different ways to do this. It is a little limiting with OPMA to not be able to talk outside of meetings, but we have a formal presentation here controlled by the Robert's Rules of Orders plus the workshop agenda. I will point out, though, that these rules of procedures were brought to the workshop on January 14th for conversation and discussion, which is where we would typically ferret out these types of things. And so it's a little bit more awkward to do this through the amendment process. And so I'm going to poke at you, Mr. Fitzpatrick, because this is not streamlining. This is popping it out of our normal procedure, which was, it's easier to arm wrestle down here at the table. So I guess just encouraging that, hey, we've got opportunities to do these before they hit the consent agenda. Let's arm wrestle together in that standpoint. The other piece is just from the standpoint of the rules of procedures as written, the second mayor and council member comments is not there. That is typically something that's put into our workshop agenda. So I'm not certain that I understand what exactly we're striking from this document, because there is only one listed. So that's my question.
So it's the question and council questions and concerns, which we don't have separately.
Understand, but it's not in the rules of procedures. Right. It's not currently in the rules of procedures. So I'm not certain what we're striking if it's not in there. If we wanted to put explicitly that the workshop agenda should not contain that, we could add a line. That's my question.
And I had actually emailed the clerk and administrator and mayor prior to us having that conversation and asked if we should be putting the question and concern of the council in as a line item in 4.1. But because it's generally part of the workshop agenda, the answer was probably not, because it's just part of the workshop agenda. So I didn't bring it up when we discussed this in the workshop to add it as another item. I personally would like to see it stay, because I think from when this was originally set up, the intent of that item is different than just council member comments. The intent is, and we talked about this briefly at the retreat, that's our opportunity as the council, because the mayor does and city administrator tend to set the agenda based on city business. That's our opportunity to bring items forward that we would like to see added to the agenda. So it does break a space out for that, separate than just talking about things that we've done in the community or heard in the community or things we've done, which is more of the comments. So I'd like to keep it.
Mayor Stern.
Mr. Mathey, and then Councilwoman Livedall.
Thank you. Yeah, I would not be in favor of this amendment. I think we need it both places. I think the mayor and council member comments are particularly helpful at the end of the meeting to discuss things that came up during the workshop agenda. And that can be, those can be some substantive issues sometimes. So I would not be in favor.
Duly noted, Gary. Councilwoman Livedall.
Yeah, as Gary mentioned, just a little bit of perspective going back to when we first began this system. I mean, I think don't quote me on this, but I think that it has been brought up in the past that maybe we could streamline by taking this out. But what was apparent is that things do come up in the workshop that then kind of inform that question and concern portion and then the future agenda item. And so then the last mayor and council member comments is a little bit more of that formal, potentially response after public comment as well. I mean, though we don't officially respond, it does happen in the format we have here. So I think I kind of agree with Gary. I think if you give it a little time, you might kind of see why it's still there. But I mean, if it feels redundant, we can bring this up again at another time and consider doing something different.
Thank you, Britt. Any other comment? Mr. Fitzpatrick, response or question, clarification?
No, that was very helpful. I learned a lot, and think I owe Councilmember Newell a reason why we're talking about this. A lot of this is very new to me. At the retreat, I was a little in over my head, and it took me a minute to get caught up, which happened earlier this week. So I apologize for the delay. Next year, I'll be a little more on top of things. I would like to table that amendment for the moment and propose the second one, which may connect. Second amendment is a little more controversial. I really value public comment. Sometimes our meetings run late and we don't get a lot of opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. I wanted to see thoughts on moving the public comment up between the business agenda and the workshop agenda, either before or after the break. There's a couple reasons for this. One is a lot of community members are interested in actions that the council takes and would like to respond to those actions, but are forced to wait until the end of the workshop agenda to speak to things that happened on the business agenda. And the workshop agenda does not actually have actions being taken. So while it's relevant to the public, my experience, as we saw tonight, is that when people have comments pertaining to the workshop agenda, they actually come to these meetings and present those comments at the beginning of the meeting because they know what's coming up on the workshop rather than at the end of the meeting. So I thought it would be better served to the public to have public comment, the second public comment earlier in the meeting so that more people can take advantage of it. I welcome feedback.
You explained it well. Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Ms. Libdahl, we'll start with you.
I think at the initial hearing of this, it sounds to me like we would end up in a situation where we really just have 3 comment periods. At the end of the meeting, you're right, not always does the public stick it out with us to the very end. But the ones who do may have something to say, especially in response to the kind of conversation we have in the workshop, which is a lot more open and dialogue. So I kind of feel like just taking it away from the end would leave people feeling like they don't have that opportunity anymore to engage at that point, and that we end up with 3 comment periods.
Mr. Tabor and then Mr. Eckert. Thank you, Britt.
Yeah, I think the beginning and the end makes sense. Otherwise, the only equitable way to do it is have citizen comment after every single agenda item.
Mr. Eckert.
Yeah, I've seen another city and school board that does it that way. Yeah. I can see the value in what you're proposing, Michael. I would only want to do that, though, if we reinstated a time limit on the public comment, which we took away purposely at the last rules of procedures. And that's because, just historical perspective, when things are quiet, and we don't get a lot of public comment, and it lasts as long as it lasts. But when things aren't quiet, and I was in the audience at the time, but I watched, well, Britt and Ed and Gary, when this room was full with people who were not happy, and public comment lasted an hour and a half, 2 hours, with some people's pre-stated purpose of we're going to talk so that you don't get to your business. And so if we put it in the middle, we'd almost have to put a limit. Otherwise, we won't get to the workshop agenda items if something happens. And we didn't want to limit people. Right now, the only limit on the second public comment is our 9 o'clock official meeting end time, which we can vote to waive. And if people want to stay till midnight to make public comment, well, we're here. But if we put it in the middle, then we don't get to our business, what workshop business. But I've watched the council go through a rough, well, months of nights of hours of public comment.
Amen.
So I would be hesitant to do it. I appreciate the thought. And yeah, and there were many nights where I was the only person left at the end of the meeting to make public comment. But and then
Mayor.
Becky used to say, public comments, Rick, because I was it. So
Could I just add one clarifying
go ahead.
just on
Councilwoman
what
Liddell.
Rick said. Part of the history of that was that there was a rule on the books that limited to 15 minutes. And then when things occurred in the community, and the community needed to be able to come here and talk to us, that rule was not enforced repeatedly, to the point where the community didn't realize there was a rule. And so it became difficult, to have a rule and to sometimes enforce it and to sometimes not. And we felt that it was more fair to allow the community, to not have that limitation. But given your recommendation, I feel, yeah.
Councilwoman Crowe.
And I would like to see the 3 opportunities for folks to give comment, with the exception of in the middle, there will be a time limit. Yeah, it would be great so that folks aren't sitting out there or waiting until the very end, and still have comment at the end with what Rick referred to, in the fact that we do have our time that we do end. But it would be great if there was public comment in the middle with time limit folded in there.
While everybody's pondering the question, allow me to say, I chair the meeting, as of all my predecessors, of the city council, but it is not the mayor's meeting. It is a city council meeting. These policies, procedures, approaches are entirely the domain of my colleagues to my left and to my right. And so I am purposely holding back because it is a council meeting and they have the authority here. Mr. Tabor.
I have a question, Ed, that you might answer with your expertise. So often I don't feel like we have the pressure of a demand of city comment. I feel like there's a lot of people that are, and then there is, right, suddenly. So could we amend the agenda to add a third public comment in the middle of the meeting if we felt like that was needed?
I believe the council can amend its agenda at any time, but I'll turn to the city clerk for any insight or comment.
You would be amending your agenda at agenda review. So
Right.
I don't know if you're going to understand what the need is once you kind of get into it, unless the room's full.
Yeah, so
You know,
so it could be at the beginning of the meeting, we could amend the agenda because there's so much public comment that, or maybe there was a hot topic on the business agenda or workshop that we knew that, and then we could put public comment after the item.
Absolutely. That's why we call for a motion and a second to accept the agenda or amend the agenda at the top of the meeting, though it's already been apparently put into concrete. It's not. It's the council's meeting and you have the ability to amend. Mr. Newell.
Just observations, haven't been in more than one meeting and one organization. There's lots of ways for us to get organized and try to do great things. From the standpoint at the end of the meeting, it does give an opportunity for people to comment on our discussion during the workshop. And typically things come out of workshop and go into consent agenda or onto the business agenda. And so for them to be able to do that, if they wait to the next meeting, the freight train's going. The stuff's on the consent agenda and it's in the business agenda. And if somebody makes public comment, it's harder for us as a team to open up or pull that item off the consent agenda. Just observation on human behavior. The other piece is that since I've been here, that last one at the end typically doesn't get a whole lot of play. You know, in the past 2 years, I don't know, maybe if best 30 minutes total spent on it over the past, 30 council meetings. Well, not 30, 60, I guess it's 3 a month. 72 council meetings I've been at. It's not, and so it's there as a typed item to give an opportunity, an option for the public for us to listen to them if they so desire. I don't see a harm with it being on the paper. This is my sense of this discussion at this point.
Mr. McVeigh, I know you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think Mr. Newell raises a very good point. The primary reason why we have the public comment period at the end of the meeting is for people to weigh in on issues that come up during the workshop and prior to them going on either business or consent agenda. So I would be in favor of leaving the 2 public comment periods as we have them and not changing that.
Any other input? Mr. Eckert.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add it. I think with the exception of paid parking, for the most part, if we have a full room of public comment, it's not generally related to an item on the agenda. It's generally related to a community concern. And the first comment, folks talk, we listen, and then they generally leave. I mean, that's what I've seen over years and years and years of being there or being up here. So I think if we have a really hot agenda item, particularly if it's going to be on the workshop, as Doug suggested, we can always amend the agenda at that meeting. And if we see the room is full, we could always make an announcement and just have a sign up. We have a sign up sheet. People don't tend to use it. But just if folks are here to sign up for us to speak on a particular agenda item, please sign up and let us indicate your interest. And then we make the agenda item as go. And then that way we adjust to the community as the community is showing us their interest in that particular week. So,
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Mayor, having heard the mind of the council, I withdraw my amendments, but I want to add that was extremely illuminating for me. My apologies to Councilor Newell for the non-streamlinedness tonight, but it will be beneficial and pay dividends in the future.
Is there any other comment? I've had the motion withdrawn. Does the second, was there a second on the motion? And there's.
Yes. The initial motion was a second.
Yes, we're back to the initial motion
To approve.
to approve it as
Stands.
Yeah.
Is that correct, clerk?
Yeah.
So we have a motion on the table to approve the Poulsbo City Council Rules of Procedure. We refer to it as council policies as is and was in your agenda unamended. And any last question on the motion as it now stands? Mr. Eckert.
Yeah, Michael, did you have a third, you had said about with the staff presentation? Or no, okay.
Appreciate that clarification. Any other question for the motion on the table? Mr. McVeigh, not seeing any. I'm going to call for the vote, starting to the left again with Mr. Newell. Mr. Newell?
Newell, aye.
Crow, aye.
Eckert, aye.
Tabor, aye. Fitzpatrick, aye.
Livedall, aye.
Mr. McVeigh?
McVeigh, aye.
So we have adopted the rules of procedure as they are. We note for the record that the council can amend its agenda separate from what is pre-established. And so that will leave the council a considerable room to allow for public comment. My only comment on this, for those of you who have borne with us, and I know a number in the audience for the affordable housing talk tonight, which is a big lift. I appreciate your patience. The irony being, we were attempting to streamline, and in streamlining, we extended. But if you think about it, anytime you're going to make a change, there it is. But the effort was intended to streamline. I appreciate irony. And lastly, I'll note for the audience, but Mr. Tabor and I are Kitsap voter. And this has to do with the school levy and bond issues that are out there, whether you're for them, whether you're against them. The deadline for mailing those in is February the 10th. And I urge all of our citizens to participate, yay or nay, on this important vote for their school district. Mr. Newell.
Yeah, and yes, please vote. But just for clarification, it's two different levies. There is no bond on this. It's two levies,
But it's on either side of the page, so don't miss it because I almost did.
but it's levies, there's not a bond. This is
You're quite correct, Mr. Newell. I stand corrected. It's two levies, an operations levy and a capital levy, which confused me and called it a bond levy. Again, please vote on this issue. The deadline is February the 10th, and your participation in this democracy these days is more critical than ever at every level. So please exercise that right to vote. I note for the record, it is now 20 to 7. How long of a break does the council wish?
Let's see.
The suggestion is 5 minutes because of the lateness of the hour. We're going to adjourn at 6:40 and re-adjourn at 6:45 for the workshop. I'll note as my colleagues regain their seat, in the interest of streamlining, we reduced our break to 5 minutes, which only worked out to a total of 8 minutes. So we're right in keeping with the web and weave of the evening. Am I right, City Administrator? At least we're consistent, and that's important. Welcome to the workshop portion of our agenda. We have 4 items we'll be hearing tonight. The first will be special events in March 2026, and I think Jeff will be reintroducing our new special events coordinator, followed by 2024 Planning Commission transaction and expenditure report, and then the long-awaited Housing Affordability Workshop Series, Workshop 2 of 4, 2 tonight, and then questions and concerns of the council and continued public comments that you heard about earlier. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to our Parks Director, Jeff Osmick.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening, community members. Be fairly succinct here. I am joined by Emily Hasha, our brand new Special Events Coordinator, and she is right into the thick of it, but I'll be leading the presentation, and then you will be seeing, hopefully, you'll be seeing her every month here. So we have 3 events coming up for March. The first is the St. Patty's Day Beer Run. This is a classic event. You're familiar with this most likely. This is going to be on March 14th. This is the annual fun run charity. It goes between, and if you don't want to run, you can walk it as well, but it goes between a variety of different breweries in Poulsbo, and it's attended by up to 1,000 folks. That event runs from 9 a.m. and wraps up around 1 p.m. The second event, and they do coordinate closely with the city, and they are coordinating with police for crossing Viking over by Echoes Brewery, because they have to change from rainy days to Echoes. The second event is a brand new one. So this is the Bunny Run, and this is Poulsbo Community Church putting this on. So after their Easter egg hunt, they're doing a fun run. And originally they thought there'd be 25 people, but they're thinking there might be upwards of 50 or even up to 100. The run is entirely on sidewalks. It's right after their Easter egg hunt, and it's going to go from the church. It'll go down Finn Hill, Viking, up. Oh, geez, is that Bond? Yes, and then come all the way around and back up again. This is going to be on March 28th. They're going to be leaving their church from 8:30, and then the run will finish around 12:30, but entirely on sidewalks, and they're using crosswalks, and has been reviewed by police and public works as well. The last event is brand new. So we have 2 brand new events this year, and this is the Viking Spring Dash. This is a fundraiser for scholarship funds for the North Kitsap Soccer Club. And this is going to start over at Strawberry Fields and end at Strawberry Fields. What they're expecting is hopefully up to 250 folks. They're going to go down Knoll Road, turn around, come back up, and end back on the fields. And they are coordinating with the school district, so they have permission to use the parking lot and those fields.
Question, Jeff, if they're running down Knoll Road, will they observe the temporary roundabout as they make that turn and come back?
They're
that we heard
using
about from City Engineer Rain so much about tonight.
Well, hang on. We can, if you want to see, we can actually pull that up, what their route is. But they're going to be on sidewalks as well. There'll be no road closures, anything of the same. And we'll pull that up in just a moment. Did I say north? They're going north? They're going south. Okay. There we go. Okay. Isn't Emily wonderful? Thank you, Emily. So I'm just going to hold this up. You can see the red line. This is in your agenda packets as well. So in case you wanted to follow up and have a specific route, and that has been reviewed by Police and Public Works as well. Brand new one. So we're really excited for them. And that is also being held on, the 29th of March. So one day after the Bunny Run. And with that, are there any questions?
Any questions, Council? Mr. McVeigh? Not seeing any?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
And I thank the audience. I know there's any number of folks here because of the good work our planning and economic development are doing on the question of the Housing Affordability Workshop Series. So if you'd kick us off, Heather.
Thank you, Mayor Stern. Before we do that, I am going to go over the Planning Commission transaction and expenditure report. This is a municipal code requirement that annually the commission reports on the transactions they made, which are recommendations to our city council or to our hearing examiner, and then the expenses that were incurred for the planning commission meeting. So in total, our planning commission met 10 times last year, which is actually very low. It's the lowest in my tenure. That's because of all the great work that we done in the previous years on the comprehensive plan update. The notable transactions that they made action are the adoption of our comprehensive plan, also the land development regulations and the critical areas ordinance. So all of these you've heard of, it's nothing new. There are 2 land use permits they made recommendations on, and that is the Kitsap Transit Maintenance Facility, which will make us 0 emissions for our fleet, and that's happening right here in Poulsbo and Viking Way. And the other of which is the Sandstone Plan Residential Development on the corner of Knoll and Knoll. It's for 87 new single-family residences. That project is in-house for grading permit approval. To move on to the expense report, the total expense for the year were $252.
We have a question. Hold on,
I
Mr.
don't know if we need to correct it for the minutes, but I did notice while the reports say 2025, the agenda item says 2024. So I don't know if we need to
Great
fix that.
catch. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't catch that earlier.
Yeah.
The
Thank you.
clerk will catch a Scribner's error. Thank you, Rick.
Excellent. This is 2025 we're reporting on. And so the total expensive, this is just for mailing out for the public hearing notice. One thing we did this year was we notified every property owner that was impacted by the critical areas update with the stream buffer. And we sent all of them a post, our largest expense. And then we do mail our commissioner upon request a hard packet of the agenda items. So that concludes the transaction and expenditure report. Any questions?
Questions, council? And I can't tell if Mr. McVeigh has a question, so the clerk will alert me on that score. Not seeing any. We will now move on to housing affordability. Heather.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your giving us this time, first of all, and for those that are here in the audience to listen to our second in a series of 4. It's been a lot of work that's been done by our planning manager, Nicole Coleman, and we're excited tonight for you all to take the action of giving us direction on which programs and incentives to work on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nicole Coleman.
Good evening, council and mayor and those who are attending. Sorry, let me get settled. Okay, now I'm good. This is workshop 2 in the Housing Affordability Workshop series. Tonight's focus is on housing incentives and programs, specifically the tools the city could use to improve housing feasibility and affordability. And briefly tonight, how those tools function in practice. The workshop builds on the cost drivers that we discussed in January at workshop 1 and sets the stage for the implementation and policy decisions we will explore in the next 2 sessions. At the end of tonight's presentation, council will be asked to participate in a non-binding vote to help narrow the list of incentives and programs you would like to take a deeper dive into in workshop 3 on February 18th. We have built-in breakpoints again for questions, just so you know, with the first one coming about 30 minutes in. So just an FYI. But of course, you can ask questions along the way, always. We just wanted to let you know there are breakpoints.
Yeah, this is evidence of true streamlining, and thank you for setting the example tonight, Nicole.
Sure. Doing my best. A reminder that this is a 4-part workshop series. We began on January 7th. We will continue on February 18th and then finish up on March 4th. In addition, there is a website that's linked from the Planning and Economic Development website off to the right. In the menu, it says Housing Affordability, and all the materials and links to the videos of these presentations are there if anyone shows any interest and would like to watch them or read the materials. The purpose of this workshop series is to help build a common understanding of the factors that influence housing affordability in Poulsbo, identify the tools within the city's control, and ultimately guide council in setting clear policy direction for 2026 and beyond. Through these 4 workshops, we are working toward informed, intentional decisions about how and whether the city should intervene to support a wider range of housing options. A reminder about what we learned in workshop 1, we established that housing costs are driven by both market factors and local decisions. Market factors such as interest rates, construction and labor costs, land values, and broader economic conditions have significant impacts on the overall cost of housing, and those largely determine whether development is feasible. These factors are generally outside of our control as a city. However, we also discussed how local cost drivers are where the city does have influence, and how local fees, development standards, and review timelines meaningfully affect project feasibility at the margins. While local decisions may not overcome market factors on their own, they can make the difference for projects that are close to penciling, particularly for smaller infill and missing middle housing types. The goal of tonight's workshop is to introduce potential incentive tools and affordability programs, and to identify ones maybe the most aligned with Poulsbo needs, our staff capacity, and your policy direction. As we move through the presentation, I would encourage you to keep 3 questions in mind. What outcomes are we trying to achieve? What barriers are these tools meant to address? And which households are we ultimately trying to support? Just a reminder that tonight is not about adopting programs or making commitments. It's about identifying which tools are worth a deeper analysis in workshop 3. This workshop is intentionally about narrowing, not expanding, the list of housing tools under consideration. Before diving into the individual tools and programs, it's important to distinguish between incentives and programs. Incentives are typically project-level tools that reduce cost, increase capacity, or improve feasibility. They are generally faster to implement and more flexible with lower administrative and fiscal impacts. Programs, on the other hand, are formal policy frameworks that require ordinance adoption, ongoing administration, monitoring, and long-term oversight. Programs often deliver deeper and longer-lasting affordability outcomes, but they also require greater staff and fiscal commitment. Okay, so this is the list of incentive tools we will walk through tonight. Each of these tools addresses a different cost driver or barrier identified in workshop 1. As we walk through these tools, staff will be highlighting not just housing outcomes, but also implementation, timing, and staff effort, since those are critical factors to determine if we can realistically move forward with them. I have provided via email and then also in front of you an updated table. Heather and I did some additional work this week and made a few changes. So we wanted to make sure you had the most updated information in front of you. And this updated presentation is also on the project website. So let's start with density bonuses. And then we've also, rather than have a separate item for voluntary inclusionary zoning, they're very similar. So if you notice that that is no longer in the presentation, that is why. Density bonuses are one of the most commonly used housing affordability tools because they directly address project feasibility. The basic concept is that in exchange for providing affordable units, a project is allowed to build more units than the base zoning would otherwise allow. That additional density helps spread fixed costs across more units, improving the financial viability of affordability. The key consideration for density bonuses is calibration. They need to be large enough to matter, but not so large that they create infrastructure or compatibility concerns. The tool works best in areas where additional housing is already planned and are supported by existing services.
And just quickly, if you could remind for residential medium, residential high, what those numbers are, like how many units are allowed in each of those now?
In residential high, you can do 16 to 22 units per acre, and in residential medium, you can do 6 to 15 units per acre. And that was increased with our comprehensive plan update in June. Next slide. So what does a density bonus do? It allows more units on site. It generally will help low to moderate income households, again, looking at the 80% to 120% area median income households, and that is considered our workforce housing. The housing types that are usually encouraged with this type of incentive is affordable housing, and that would be income restricted, smaller units, which are naturally affordable, and then missing middle housing types as well, townhomes, duplexes, triplexes. Where it makes sense, citywide, potentially for a certain type of housing. And then our implementation timeframe is short, but the staff effort is low to moderate. And that's because the city already has a density bonus code section on the books, but it has never been used to date. And I think in my 9 years, I've had one inquiry about it. So the work doesn't involve creating a new code section or creating a new program from scratch, but rather reevaluating and calibrating existing standards so that they align with current market conditions and can actually function as an incentive. The primary effort, which is the moderate, would be in adjusting thresholds, what type of bonus we want to use, if we want to limit to certain type of projects, so the program is meaningful and usable in Poulsbo's context. Once calibrated, administration and monitoring are relatively straightforward compared to more complex programs.
So just following on your comment, you said in your time here, you've only had one or none?
I've had one inquiry.
So, but we already have some density bonuses of various types, either from the RCW or other things. I guess what change, I don't know, maybe the next slide gets into what changes could create more interest.
We currently have a density bonus of 20% in exchange for a public benefit, and it's a list of public benefits. What I've been finding out that 20% just isn't enough to make it viable for someone to use.
So it would be 50% or 40.
It would be more than 20. What that max is, I'm not sure. Yeah, of course. Just to give you an example, just imagine a small multifamily project that under today's zoning in the RH residential high zone would allow 22 units. The developer is looking at whether that project pencils in the current market. If we offered a more robust density bonus, we might allow that same project to build 30 units. If a portion of those units are income restricted, for example. Affordable to households earning, let's say, 80 to 120% of AMI. Those units don't make the project free or suddenly profitable, but they could potentially help spread fixed costs like land, permitting, and infrastructure across more units. And this could move a project that is close to feasible into something that actually can move forward. And that's a very small example. It might not be the best example, but. Of course.
Okay. So you just mentioned income restricted. How would that be used to, so for missing middle, how would that be used to say incentivize that? Because that's a housing type versus a income level. So what would, just saying you could build more, how does that drive us to getting that particular housing type?
That would be a policy decision. Do we want to focus on housing type or income levels? Generally speaking, certain type of housing lends itself more to specific income levels, but it's not necessarily guaranteed.
I'm saying, what do we do? Like, what's the policy we would put in place? Say, if we said, okay, you can build 33% higher than the zoning, but we want missing middle. Like, what are we saying to drive it towards missing middle? Like, but you have to build in this square footage range, in this type of house. Like I'm saying, what's that language look like?
So one of the examples that I've seen that I think could potentially be more viable is having more of a tiered approach where it's not one size fits all. You could have a density bonus of 25 to 30% for just anything. Let's just say that. You could have tier 2 could be a 30 to 35% density bonus if you build a specific type of housing. A 40 to 50% density bonus, let's say, if you build income restricted housing. So there are opportunities to calibrate to what we want to do for Poulsbo. Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Okay. And of course, with every incentive and program, there are trade-offs. And we will go over trade-offs with each item. We're not going to go over each one in detail, but additional units can increase demand on infrastructure, utilities, streets, parks, stormwater, which means bonuses need to be coordinated with our capital programs team and make sure we have infrastructure capacity in these areas. Increased unit count can also raise neighborhood concerns, of course, about scale, character, and compatibility, particularly in transition areas. We have a lot of properties that are, go from residential low to commercial, and we don't have a great in between space often in our zoning. And then from a feasibility standpoint, bonuses need to be, again, calibrated. Too small and they won't be used, too large and they can create service or infrastructure strain. Okay. The next one we're going to talk about is dimensional and design flexibility. Dimensional design flexibility focuses on how units fit on a site rather than how many units are allowed. These tools adjust standards like setbacks, lot coverage, building separation, open space requirements, tree retention to allow housing to be built more efficiently, especially on smaller constrained sites. In many cases, this can unlock housing without increasing public costs or changing the allowed density. The key question is how much flexibility the city is comfortable allowing while still maintaining predictable neighborhood form and design quality. So what this does is uses land more efficiently and generally helps low to moderate, again, our workforce housing population. Housing types encourage, it could lend itself to more missing middle housing types, courtyard or motor court type housing, cottage housing. Where it makes sense, again, we could focus on citywide, but for specific types of housing. And then implementation is short in terms of the time frame, and the staff effort is low because we already have codes in place, and it can be implemented primarily through just targeted amendments of our existing code. An example, if you think about lot coverage, and just to clarify, lot coverage is the amount of structure allowed on a site. That's different than impervious surface. That's more of a stormwater management threshold, but the structure, so the building and maybe decks and things like that. So lot coverage is the amount of structure that can cover a site. Even when a code sets maximum lot coverage, projects are already constrained by other requirements such as landscaping, parking, stormwater, and tree retention. Those standards inherently limit how much a site can be built on. And in some cases, the lot coverage cap becomes an additional layer that doesn't meaningfully change outcomes, but does reduce site flexibility. Removing or adjusting that limit can allow projects to respond more efficiently to site conditions without increasing height, use, or overall intensity. The key point is that flexibility isn't about building more, it's about letting existing standards do the work and avoid unnecessary constraints that affect feasibility at the margins. So some trade-offs of dimensional design flexibility. It can improve housing feasibility, but must be carefully calibrated again. Reduce setbacks or increase lot coverage may raise concerns about neighborhood fit, privacy, and building scale, if not paired with clear design standards. Simplifying dimensional rules also requires maintaining quality design, building design, livability, and streetscape character. And while individual adjustments seem minor, their cumulative effect across multiple sites can gradually change the form of the neighborhood. So clear communication is essential, as flexibility is sometimes misperceived as increased density, even when the underlying zoning intensity remains the same.
And sorry, I should have looked this up before tonight. But can you remind me, we talked a lot about height requirements in commercial zones. What about our resident? Do we have a height restriction in residential? I just don't remember.
We do. It's 35 feet or 45 feet with under building parking.
Okay. Would that be something that potentially we would allow flexibility under? So to encourage, like I said.
Yeah, similar to what we've done in the commercial,
triplexes.
similar to what we've done in the commercial zones. If you wanted to increase height in specific areas, we kind of create some targeted height increases. But ultimately, the height increase might not be the key when trying to unlock a townhouse style development, because that doesn't necessarily need more height. That needs more width, like more site to work on. So it really, I don't know if height unlocks it in the same way.
I'm just thinking of I've come from places where the ground floor turns into the garage, and then what would have been a 3-story house is still a 3-story house, but with a garage underneath.
Yeah.
So it's a 4-story house with the garage. So I just don't know if that's something that this lends to.
It could, yeah. Those are all things we could discuss under this topic area. Lot coverage is the example I use because it's a little easier to visualize, I think. Okay. So the third one we're going to talk about is everyone's favorite topic, which is parking. Parking requirements are one of the most significant and expensive local cost drivers for housing. Parking reductions can right size the standards to better reflect actual demand, particularly in smaller units, infill, and housing near services. Reducing parking can meaningfully lower per unit cost and improve project feasibility. The key consideration is balancing affordability and feasibility with concerns about spillover parking, equity, and public perception. Pretty self-explanatory. What this does, it requires fewer parking spaces on a site. It will generally lend itself to more renter and workforce households, 60 to 120% AMI. Housing types it could lend itself to encouraging more ADUs because we still require parking for ADUs. Duplexes, triplex, townhomes, multifamily, kind of infill sites with limited area. It could make a lot of sense near transit corridors, such as SR 305 and Viking. The implementation would be short to mid the next couple years. And the staff effort is low to moderate. Where am I at? Because, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Because the city already has parking standards in place, so we can build on that. That's the low side of the staff effort. And we have a lot of examples we can pull from around the Puget Sound area and talk to planners, talk to people who've tried to implement certain type of parking reductions and see if it works, see what that threshold is that makes it work. So there's a lot of information to pull from. However, these changes will also require coordination with our engineering team to evaluate on-street capacity, circulation, safety, and then potential there's always unintended consequences. And with reduced parking, I think that's one we have to really look at, looking at neighborhood impacts. Yeah, so.
Nicole, we've looked at that Highway 305 corridor.
Mhm.
And we're allowing greater use. And that corridor is served by mass transit, specifically Kitsap Transit. And we know there's a great emphasis put right now on transit-oriented development, where we can identify that public transit within proximity to these hoped-for developments if we go that way. Would that then take the onus off us with parking and some of those other traditional constraints?
I'm trying to understand. Can you?
If we build in relation to the bus corridors.
Okay.
And the object being people can avail themselves easily in proximity to mass transit. Would that alleviate and allow us greater leeway on the question of traditional parking to unit ratio?
It could, yes, of course. And this is where it could be strategic reductions specifically along the SR 305 corridor, because there is actually frequent transit, whereas Viking might not be as frequent, but I think it's on a 30-minute headway now, which I hadn't heard till recently. And there's always the question with parking reductions is what comes first, the chicken or the egg? You know, is it the transit or the housing? What leads to the need for more transit? And so there's a balance there. You don't want to create a situation where I always use this example because I was going along Highway 99 to visit my brother Everett for a while. And every time I would go home at night, there would just be cars lined up on 99 and people walking to their apartment complexes, which no longer require parking. At night on 99 is not someplace I personally would like to be walking after dark. So there's a point where you have to find something that works. And so the example I had, which is perfect, lead into that is the SR 305 example. And it's not something dramatic that you just, Bremerton has gone the path of just eliminating parking requirements in the city and letting the market decide. And I've heard from a lot of developers say, I heard them say this, I haven't necessarily seen it happen in action yet, but if our product needs parking, we will provide parking. So there's that sense that Bremerton went with is that, okay, we're going to let you, the market, decide what works, because again, it just depends. If you have a choice between a location that has a parking and doesn't, would you choose the one that has parking? So it's just, they're trying to let the market decide those things. I don't know if we're quite ready for that in Poulsbo, but I think there's an ease into it potentially in very specific locations. 305 could be example. You can have an example of what would normally require 90 spaces. Maybe you have a reduction that only requires 75. It's 15. You can have joint parking with commercial. There's a lot of opportunity on 305 for joint parking and for you have daytime uses and then you have evening uses, maybe all the guest sided offsite. So there's just opportunities in that specific location. Viking is really tough. There's not a lot of offsite opportunity. When you get especially down towards 305 in Viking, where do your guests park? There's no street parking. There's not a lot of commercial uses down on that and that are available, except for maybe, the Arco, the McDonald's halfway down. So yeah, there's not a lot of opportunity. So I think it's just calibrating it and looking at the places that might make sense for Poulsbo.
And just, our Kitsap Transit rep on the Complete Streets Committee did point out to us at one point, there was a rule change at one point as far as citing new bus stops. And I believe he said that they can only cite new bus stops on completely flat locations, if I remember correctly. Because we had talked about a couple of places and he's like, it has to be flat. So that was a while back. But so new bus stops are limited by geography. But so we just have to think about that. So I mean, 305, pretty flat. That's probably not a problem, and there's a lot there. But as we go off the sides of 305, new bus stops might not be an option. So we definitely want to work with Kitsap Transit.
Yeah. And that's likely due to ADA accessibilities, having a flat landing space for the ramps and such. That would be my guess. So that's parking reductions, always a fun topic. Never dull when parking's in the mix. And of course, the trade-offs that you would assume, spillover, neighborhood concerns. There is an equity consideration that reducing parking can benefit households without cars, but may disadvantage those who rely on vehicles in order to get to their jobs. So you got to find that right fit. And then of course, just communication, and oftentimes parking reductions can be misunderstood by the community.
We have a question from Councilman McVeigh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
I'm forgetting he's there.
Nicole, well, thank you, Britt. Nicole, I'm wondering, I might be open to this if the parking deferrals, if it's in the right place. But I do remember what I get concerned about is it's fine for a developer to say, let the market decide. But sometimes, particularly if the building is downtown, they can rely on public parking for tenants. I know we had some issues with the Sophie apartment building when it first opened downtown, with some, particularly guests, I think, parking in free public parking. I think that's gotten a little bit better. But I just, do you or Heather have a sense of, I know that the majority of people that live in the Sophie apartment building, as an example, I don't mean to pick on them, but they're a good example, I think. Most of the tenants there did buy parking permits. That it's not generally included in your rent, is my understanding. It's an additional cost. But I still get concerned about private residential housing taking up public parking spaces in some locations. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Am I correct? That is an issue we need to keep an eye on, and are there ways that we can control that or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say that charging for parking in apartment and multifamily is a standard. It's not unique to the Sophie. It's not unique to Poulsbo. I paid for parking in a suburban apartment complex in Federal Way when I lived there. If you want paid parking with a specific spot, you pay for it. That's just what the market does. It's not unique. One of the things, so if we encourage this on 305, there is quite a bit of public parking on 10th Avenue, for example, and outside of Central Town and Country, there's that space. And you assume that if there's an overflow, that folks will take up that space. And the Sophie has been brought up a few times as well. One of the examples of ways to manage that is through requiring paid parking on the street. So I don't want to get into that conversation as part of this, but that is something that I've read, especially about downtowns, is if it's free parking, of course, a guest or overflow or additional car might say, well, why would I pay for on-site parking when I have free street parking? One of the ways that downtowns manage that is through paid parking. So
Yeah, and hopefully now that we are actually enforcing our parking rules downtown, that might help alleviate the problem. But I know it's something it's a delicate balancing act, it seems
very
like.
much.
Thank you.
To tack onto that, with the parking considerations of multifamily, what about when the development abuts residential and it's not in a mixed use or commercial zone where we have, downtown is unique. We do have a zone that could be paid parking. Well, we're not going to implement paid parking in all of our residential neighborhoods. So when larger multifamily developments pop up adjacent to a residential neighborhood, if they're charging for their parking spaces and it pushes and there's readily available free parking, I mean, what's the enforcement mechanism of that?
There's none. I mean, unless the city were to undertake that. It's kind of letting the human nature kind of play out in that environment. Okay. But it's not necessarily, I agree with you that we do have some environments where we have very kind of older residential neighborhoods that might not even have the on-street parking capability. And if they do, it's limited. Old Town's a good example of that. There is on-street parking, but it's not necessarily really designated. And so you don't want to create a situation where you're making that worse for the existing residents. So it was really would have to, I believe, in my opinion, be very specific to locations, and be really thoughtful about how and where.
I mean, that's relevant to me. That's not a hypothetical. That's an
Yeah,
actual
so
building.
I'll ask it for her. We're building a 4-story building on 305, the active development, and the streets around there do not have curb and sidewalk. And so if there's paid parking underneath, there's going to be pressure for those cars to park down Harrison. And so that's kind of, I think it's weighing on all of our minds, is the fact that we don't have square mile after square mile where everybody's playing by the same rules. We basically have parcel by parcel, and our parcels back up. So just in that, it's the reality of where we're at, because of how small we are. And your example of people parking out on 99 and walking in the rain in the dark.
Oh yeah.
So anyway,
yeah.
Thank you for bringing this one back to the table.
Oh yeah.
It's always fun.
My favorite topic.
Yeah, I think Bremerton sees this a lot, particularly around the shipyard. People just spread out into the neighborhoods.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's
I know
definitely
somebody
a
who walked a
concern.
mile.
Yeah, and yeah, my son lives over in Bothell in what you all educated me into is a garden style apartment building. And yeah, there's multiple strips of parking next to each building. And one is you pay and reserve and you get a spot. And the other strip is guests and those who won't pay and everybody else. So it's, you either pay for the spot or you fight for the other ones.
Yep.
And it's mostly commercial around. So it's, you could park across the street at a business and walk if you choose, or you pay, or you fight.
Well,
So
the great thing is that
it is fairly normal.
this is an incentive we do not have to move forward if that's what you guys decide at the end of this meeting.
And I think it really needs to be contextual with the neighborhood around it. Because and using the example of the active, very easy for if there was no parking, they'd be over in the church or they'd be spilling down Harrison. If it's paid parking, they would be over at the church or spilling down Harrison. And so do we need to consider, or I guess I would tee up if we get into this, is that what are the off-site improvements that are required? Would we require the developer for a block around it, put in curb and gutter in order to support on-street parking, or improvements to the roads around it, not just on site, but around it if we expect this behavior. And not for answer tonight, because I know you're kind of giving us the high level, but I guess that would be my concern, would be the context. If we have zoning or changes at the parcel level, how does it fit into the neighborhood? I'm sorry, Britford, it's your backyard.
Yeah, I guess something that's come to my mind many times over the years as we see projects come before us is I keep hearing that it's very common for developers to charge for parking. It's very common. It's very common. Okay. Do we have to allow it everywhere? Like I get in some places, and I get that we want to move away from being so vehicle dependent, but Kitsap County is not there yet. Like,
Well,
our
that's what this
Costco is 20 minutes away. People- we don't have service. It fluctuates in its reliability. If the bus to the ferry is every hour, that isn't very frequent. So I guess I'm wondering if there are any options, and I know developers aren't going to like this, but to say, sorry, you don't, because they're getting a bonus. They put underground parking. They're getting a height bonus that is impacting the area around it. And then they're going to charge for parking that pushes residents out of the building that it doesn't feel fair. And it doesn't feel like
If
it's
I could
contributing to
interrupt just for a
affordable
moment,
housing.
just for the good of the order of the meeting. We're just cracked open Nicole's presentation and it is now turning 7:30. However, the conversation is great. So I just want us to measure as we allow Heather and Nicole to get through this.
Expect an answer right now. I just want us to all think about what we consider a given and whether it has to be that way.
Yep. Okay. If we were to move this forward for further discussion, we'll dive deeper into those conversations. Okay, looking at the next topic, which is fee reductions and deferrals. Fee reduction deferrals directly address upfront development costs, which we discussed extensively in workshop 1. Rather than just eliminating the fees, these tools can reduce, defer, or restructure when fees are paid, often shifting payment to later in the project timeline, which reduce financing and carrying costs. This can be especially impactful for small or infill projects. The key trade-off, of course, is fiscal, how to balance housing affordability goals with predictable funding for infrastructure and services. So what this does is lowers or delays city fees to reduce upfront costs. It generally will assist workforce housing households. It can lend itself to encouraging more ADUs, small multifamily, missing middle, entry-level ownership, where it makes sense, potentially citywide for specific types of housing. As an incentive to get those types of housing. Implementation timeframe is about mid-2027 potentially. And this is considered high effort because they require fee reduction referrals require more than a simple code change and involve ongoing fiscal, administrative, and interdepartmental coordination. Adjusting fees affects multiple city funds and capital programs, requiring detailed financial analysis to understand revenue impacts, timing shifts, and long-term implications for infrastructure funding. Deferral programs also require new administrative processes to track eligibility, repayment triggers, and compliance over time. Implementation typically involves coordination across multiple departments. It would be planning, engineering, finance, public works, and legal. As well as regular monitoring and reporting to ensure those fees are collected as intended and that affordability, if that's the intent, outcomes are achieved. Unlike by right code changes, these tools create continued workload and have a fiscal risk that we have to manage and think about ahead of time. So the example I'd like to give for this one is just thinking of a mixed use project where traffic and park impact fees, for example, are typically due at the time that you get your building permit before you start vertical construction. That is what's required at the city of Poulsbo that you pay at the time of building permit issuance. Those fees can total several hundred thousands of dollars and then are included in the financing and feasibility, which increase carrying costs and the risk for a project. If the city considered allowing those traffic and park impact fees to be deferred until certificate of occupancy, for example. Certificate of occupancy is when a building is ready to be occupied by tenants. The fees would still be paid in full, but later in the process after the units are built and closer to when revenue begins for the project. And so that helps I've heard, manage some of the financing concerns. Mr. Newell?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm just rereading this. My understanding, and I must have it wrong, was that a couple years ago, the legislature updated the RCW to basically push impact fees back to certificate of occupancy. At least that's where it was when I was doing the school district stuff 4 or 5 years ago.
You have to look at it. My understanding is it could be at building permit issuance, but I could double check on that, of course.
If you could, my impression was impact fees did. I thought this discussion was about our connection fees.
No, it's about, fees in general. It could be a connection fee. My example I gave was impact fee.
So I see you writing, it's RCW 82.02.050.
Yeah. So I just know our policies, we collect them at the time building permit is issued.
Got it. Thanks.
I hope we're consistent with state law.
The housing types you listed, I noticed you don't list infill on this one. And I was kind of reading this, I kind of expected it because I thought if it's an infill, it's conceivably it's in a basically established neighborhood. And so considering lowering fees, some of the services are already to be built. Things are already to be in place. And so if we lower fees on newer construction, that's just infilling within an established neighborhood, it seems to make sense to not necessarily charge what the original builder took to put in a park when the park's already there, for example, or whatever, put in a sewer line when the sewer line's already there, and now we just have to add more connections to it. Am I misunderstanding, or you just didn't put it on, or my thoughts of what it leads to is wrong, or like?
No, smaller units, affordable, missing middle can lend itself to infill specifically. But I didn't call out infill, no, not directly. It doesn't mean it couldn't be a good incentive for that type of product.
Mr. McVeigh.
Thank you, Mayor. Nicole, I'm wondering, in addition to, giving a deferral between when a project is permitted and when its certificate of occupancy is awarded, I've seen some cities doing fee reductions, essentially turning it into a loan over a longer period of time. So the fee reduction is spread out. I would say it's deferred over a much longer period of time, say 5, 10, 20 years. Sometimes a city will charge, my understanding is sometimes a city will charge a modest interest rate on that loan. Other times they will not, depending on how, anxious they are for that type of housing. Have we done anything like that? And do you think it's feasible?
I don't believe we've done anything like that, but that's a good point. I hadn't really dove into longer beyond even C of O and what that might look like and how to administer and what that. But I think one of the concerns would be the cost at the time of building permit issuance and construction, and the cost 15 years later is likely quite a bit different. But if you try and calibrate with an interest, maybe that makes sense. But that's worth looking into.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Of course. Okay. Of course, trade-offs with fee reductions and deferrals. This can delay or reduce funding for our capital facilities, parks, transportation, utilities. It requires close coordination with our capital programs team. Programs must be structured to ensure projects still pay their proportional share and to avoid perceptions of preferential treatment, of course. Targeted approaches are generally more effective than broad reductions. But again, you need to have clear criteria and administrative tracking. And then while individual reductions may seem modest, again, the cumulative effect can significantly impact long-term revenues if not carefully administered.
And what department or departments would that administrative tracking burden fall on?
It's an excellent question. It would likely be finance, but it could also be engineering. Yeah. Okay, expedited permitting and by right approvals. Expedited permitting and by right approvals are tools that focus on reducing one of the most important cost drivers in housing construction, which is time. But I want to first note that Poulsbo's permitting and review process is already very strong. We consistently hear from applicants that staff are responsive, coordinated, and timely. That said, the question before us is whether there are targeted opportunities to shave additional time off the process, because even a few months, that could help projects reach construction sooner and pencil a little better.
I touch a lot of jurisdictions, and I can confirm we have the most well-regarded and speediest permitting in the county, and it's held in very high regard as far as the quality. I've also heard it referred to that instead of just applying codes and getting in the way, there's the can-do, make-it-work attitude of staff on top of that.
Thank you. It's always nice to hear. So expedited permitting does this by prioritizing certain projects and setting clear review timelines, while the by right approvals reduce uncertainty by allowing projects that meet clear standards to move forward without land use review. A small example of that is our pre-approved ADUs, and we used to require a land use permit for accessory dwelling units. We no longer require a land use permit. It can go directly to building permit. So that's just an example of removing one of the layers. And so there's maybe potential other options for certain types of housing that we can remove additional one layer. So even moving a project into construction 3 to 4 months earlier can reduce carrying cost and improve the financing capability. The key consideration is staff capacity and code clarity. These tools work best when standards are objective and departments are well coordinated and well staffed.
We need to codify warm winters like we're having right now, right?
Does help the construction season. So what this does, of course, it shortens review timelines. It could help all household types. It could lend itself to small and mid-scale projects. Makes sense citywide potentially for depending on the type of housing we want to encourage. Implementation timeline is mid to 2027. It just requires significant upfront coordination across different departments to define clear objective standards and align our review timelines. Prioritizing certain projects shifts staff workload and constrain capacity if we don't have any additional resources. So while ongoing tracking is needed to ensure timelines, quality, and legal defensibility are maintained. So an example of this would be a simple example would be allowing concurrent review for specific types of housing if you want to incentivize. We currently require that you go through land use first, which is planning, and then you go to engineering for the civil and grading permit, and then you go to building permit. We could potentially look at a system that allows review all parallel at the same time, which could eliminate anywhere from 6 to 8 months potentially in the review timeline.
Do we, or have you seen other jurisdictions kind of have an advertised time for processing permits that we maintain so that there is clarity? Sometimes it feels like it's a great black box that you drop things into, and I know we're doing better than average, but is there, hey, we guarantee, or not guarantee, but our standard is to get you an answer by.
Yeah, I've seen some examples. There's plenty of municipalities, including Poulsbo, we have a permit fee for expedited permitting, but what does that really look like? It's not really necessarily thought out completely and what that looks like and what that time frame is. I've seen examples of if let's say we just do land use permitting, which is planning, it would be 45 days. We can get you through land use review in 45 days. If it's a type 2, obviously not a subdivision, that's something a little different, but something like a mixed use project. I've seen that as an example. I've seen 45, 60 days as a standard. Our requirement at the state level is 100 days. So it shaves off potentially 50 days.
And
yeah.
There's the requirements, back to your point, you know, there's the time value of money. I had not heard about concurrent before. I'll save that for future discussions.
Yeah.
That really actually, you don't have to wait a year and a half to get an SDAP, but then if you can run things in parallel, realizing there's risk if you run in parallel.
You spoke to the right. You have to have a developer who's able to understand that they need to have everything in line and consistent with our codes, because they run the risk of submitting it all together. And if planning has comments, then they have to resubmit everything. And it's not for every development group. Definitely. Yeah. Trade-offs, looking at, they constrain staff capacity, reduce We just have to have clear eligibility requirements, but these are all things we talked about, so I will move on. The next item is frontage and infrastructure flexibility. This can be among the most frontage and infrastructure requirements can be among the most expensive barriers, specifically for small scale and infill housing types. It's important to be clear that the goal here is not to eliminate street frontage requirements, safe walking path, access, ADA requirements, and long-term infrastructure standards remain essential to for Poulsbo being a walkable city, which is what we all want and support. The question here is whether there are opportunities for flexibility or alternative approaches that better scale requirements to the size and impact of a project, rather than applying full improvements in every case. This type of proportionality can help maintain safety and long-term system goals without making smaller projects infeasible. The key trade-off, of course, is timing. Flexibility may change when and how certain improvements are delivered, which requires careful coordination with our capital programs team, and how we manage our infrastructure investments and financing.
So if you could explain, because the one thing this immediately jumped in mind is maintaining standards, especially talking infill. You have kind of one set of requirements that was when it was built. Now we let a couple of properties come in the middle that now we give some sort of flexibility. So how would that be maintained? Is that just something that would be on you all to do project by project, or?
Well, there would be some, what I've seen as examples in cities like Bellingham, Olympia, Brenton, maybe. I've seen quite a few examples of specific street flexibility standards for specific types of housing, and whether it be infill or missing middle housing types. And they will look at the overall infrastructure of the existing street. If this is the last piece that hasn't been built as a sidewalk, you're not going to say, well, you don't have to do that. You will need to make that connection. If it's a street that doesn't have sidewalks, the example could be that they have to build a kind of an interim facility. It still has to meet ADA. There's still stormwater, whether that be rolled curbs. Josh is probably cringing back there at my terms. But examples of you could do maybe asphalt paved instead of a full sidewalk improvement, maintain off-street safety for those people who live there and walk on that street, but then they pay into a fee, potentially that would then lead to future full improvement of that street. So.
Okay, I mean, I was kind of thinking more of the frontage stuff too. You have 5 houses in a row with nice big front yards because they're setbacks, and 5 more houses with nice big front yards, and then you got this new house that gets dropped in the middle, and the porch is 3 feet off the street or the sidewalk, because we've now allowed flexibility of that we didn't allow the last summer. So it just becomes an oversight requirement on your department to go, no, that's not going to work there. I mean, is that just become the burden if?
Yeah, and I do speak to that because one of the concerns with the staff effort is high because we need those facilities to be somewhat designed ahead of time, and we don't always have that ability to do, or the staff capacity to think that far ahead for all of our streets. So it could be very specific to parts of town where we're trying to encourage infill or missing middle housing types. And then our engineering team could look ahead maybe, because you definitely don't want to say yes to something and then have them not give the appropriate right of way that we're going to need for that future sidewalk and facility. So it does take more forward thinking, and that's why the staff effort is high and definitely further out in the timeline. So it's definitely not let's just think about this and get it done next year. It would require a lot of coordination and thought with multiple departments as well. So, okay. Well, then I don't think I need to go over this section here. Again, the trade-offs of frontage infrastructure, we just have to really think about future capital planning and how we manage that in our financial structure. Okay, well, I built in a Q&A time, but we'll go ahead and keep going. Yeah. Mr. Tabor.
You were dealing with it. I have 7 questions I wrote down.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
So just a reminder that the risk of implementation for an incentive program is that it depends on participation in advertising and getting people bought in. So similar to the density bonus, having one applicant. And then keeping in mind what you were saying with what are the barriers being addressed, what are the outcomes, and then household cost, the trade-offs,
Mhm.
right? Because nothing's happening without impacting other things, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So thank you for putting that out there, just reiterating it, which kind of feeds into this question. So what does the staff low, medium, high effort required mean? So let's say we pick 4 items and they're all low or they're all medium or they're all high. Is that, would all low be like keep staff as is? Would all medium be we need more staff, or we would be, like how should I gauge those?
No, that's a really good point.
And that could be a future, something you
Yeah,
can answer
no.
later.
I think it's a great question, because if let's say you all decide you want to move forward with high effort, well, then we're going to have to prioritize what that looks like and think about how we bring that forward. But no, that's a great question. I don't have an answer to that directly, but.
And then just one note on parking, the biggest shortage we have in housing is for low income families, and the bottom quintile of income, only 30% own cars. So, or no, the other way around. So only 30% don't own any cars, and the average car ownership I think is like 1.2 for the bottom quintile.
Yeah.
So it's an example of like we don't need to, we all don't have 5 cars,
Yeah.
I don't. But thank you so far.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to move it.
Just
Yeah.
one quick question. Any of the high staff effort ones, do you anticipate that would require additional staff?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can assume maybe not so much additional full staff, but if you start to stack them, there would be a need for maybe a full staff person. It just depends. If it's just pick one high and we bring that forward, that's maybe part-time kind of thing. That's what we could evaluate in workshop 3. Absolutely. But if you were to stack 5 on them, absolutely, we would need more staff.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I understand that last item, the frontage and infrastructure and flexibility. It sounds to me like it's shifting the cost away from the development, but putting it on the city in some form. Is that right? Or is it a cost reduction across the board?
It's so the way I've seen it in terms of where I think it could potentially work, and there's a few different models, and I would bring those back to you guys to consider. But it's growth still needs to pay for growth. That's a standard, and that's what will continue. But when does that? So could there be an interim fix? Because to bring a crew out to do a 40-foot right of way on full infrastructure improvements is a lot more expensive than doing it all together, generally speaking. There are pieces of that I'm sure Josh would love to intervene right now and to explain to me. However, so the idea is that if they do an interim improvement for safety and an ADA and those type of things, they would pay into a future construction project.
I see.
So they're not getting out of that necessarily. So.
But they're paying into something that because we're doing the full scale project later, the overall cost is lower.
It's hard to
In
know
theory.
because if that project is 15 to 20 years down the road, that
Yeah.
cost, as we've seen, is like this. So those are the trade-offs.
I think for me, I'd
Yeah.
have to see a concrete plan of
Yeah.
how this would pencil in the long run,
Yeah.
because it seems pretty hypothetical to me.
It's a tough one, and I've seen a few programs that I'm like, okay, maybe, but we would definitely look at it in a lot more detail. So yeah, because again, our Poulsbo's walkable streets are one of the reasons we all love the city, and we're not trying to get rid of those. So, okay, let's move into programs. Programs, again, reminder, require even more structure, administration, and long-term oversight, but they also tend to deliver deeper affordability outcomes. We'll start with probably the biggest one that you may have already heard of, which is the Multifamily Tax Exemption Program, MFTE. It is a state authorized program that reduces property taxes on qualifying projects in exchange for affordability commitments. It is widely used across Washington and can be structured in different ways depending on the affordability levels that you are targeting and the types of housing that you are targeting as well. MFT does not reduce construction costs directly, but it improves long-term operating feasibility potentially. Again, it temporarily reduces property taxes in exchange for affordable units. Generally, I'll explain why that's generally. It helps renters and workforce households. generally multifamily rental housing. And where it might make sense in the city of Poulsbo is looking at I think we've talked about it mostly along the 305 corridor. Again, that's maybe that stacking piece of incentives and programs. Implementation timeframe is 2027 because it just requires, it's an ongoing program. We have to consider about who administer and how we set up that type of program. So the staff effort is high. The type of exemptions you can offer, an 8-year exemption. This is why I said generally, there is no affordability requirement. This is used in usually depressed areas that are having troubles getting housing. We don't necessarily having troubles getting housing, it's the type of housing. There is a 12-year exemption program, which is the most popular that I've seen. It requires that 20% of the units be affordable at 80% or less of AMI. And then it encourages mixed income buildings as well. So you have market rate along with affordable units in the same complex. The 20-year exemption is, it actually requires homeownership. That's a new, yeah.
That's since we took a deep dive into it? Because I'm like, I do not.
Nope. We were surprised by that too, because it used to be allowed for rental properties, but it does require homeownership. And then there are restrictions in how you monitor for resale and ongoing administration over a 20-year time period. And you are required to be in partnership with a nonprofit or housing authority. So to manage it long-term. Oh, yes. Yeah. So those are the options for a multifamily tax exemption program. Trade-offs. I'll talk to you about the tax shift in a moment. Of course, administrative oversight, targeting. If it's applied citywide, that's not necessarily what we're seeking. It's too broad. Those projects may have already been built anyways in those locations. So being too narrow, and then you maybe eliminate any participation. So it really is about finding that sweet spot for what works for Poulsbo.
Can this be done for redevelopment?
Yes. Yeah. One of them can. The 12, yeah. Heather knows more. She should have done these. She knows way more than me about MFTE. Okay, the tax shift, everyone's favorite topic, if you're familiar. So it depends on the county, but for Kitsap County, a multifamily tax exemption program is a tax shift. So there are projects in Port Orchard and Bremerton that Poulsbo residents are already paying for. I'm just going to point that out. So I think Port Orchard. Oh, Gary, I'll get to you in 1 second. Port Orchard and Bremerton have had an MFT on the books for a number of years, and they have been used. So, okay, Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I know that our planning commission, as I recall, has spent a pretty good amount of time examining whether they wanted to recommend to council, to city leadership, whether we should be pursuing the multifamily tax exemptions more aggressively. Can you or Heather just briefly characterize the conversations and why the Planning Commission has chosen not to recommend those to us in the past?
Thank you, Gary. I'll be glad to speak to that. So the Planning Commission discussed this, I believe it was in 2022. And at the time they decided, we focused in on the 12-year, and we did talk about how we could limit it to specific areas. We were, as Nicole said, specifically looking at SR 305 because of the constraints along SR 305. We were fortunate enough to really unpack and understand the shift. We did have a member from the assessor come to the Planning Commission meeting and answer questions. We did have an example of a multifamily development project that's constructed on Viking Way that we used as an example of what the shift would be. And at the end of the day, I forget the amount of units at Arundel, maybe 50 units. And the shift for each home in Poulsbo was about $50 a year in additional taxes when we ran the numbers. And our commission was not comfortable with shifting the burden on all of the other property owners. And so they ultimately made a recommendation because council asked for the planning commission to review this policy decision and make a recommendation to the city council. And the city council accepted that recommendation, and we no longer move forward with the discussions.
Thank you very much for the update.
Yeah. So I think the understanding is that the property is assessed at a certain value, and that is added to the tax rolls, but then there's an exemption that that property no longer pays for 8 to 20 years, just depending, and that money just doesn't poof. It is shifted to existing taxpayers. I will say that in everyone I've talked to in the development community, they all come back to this being the one program that can actually create units quickly. So there is a balance there. So. Okay, the next one we'll talk about is grant partnerships, which allows the city to leverage state, federal, and regional funding support, generally affordable housing and potentially infrastructure projects associated with that housing. These funds can be powerful, particularly for very low income housing, but they are competitive and require significant staff time for applications, coordination, and compliance. The main consideration is capacity, whether the city wants to pursue grants broadly or focus on smaller number of high impact opportunities. As Debbie would say, there's no free money. So it does require quite a bit of staff effort. As I just stated, high staff effort, grants often come up with strict eligibility criteria, reporting requirements, and timelines that requiring ongoing management and long-term compliance. An example of a grant. So one of the things that's spurred this conversation here tonight in this workshop series is we are being asked about programs and grants that the city would have to apply for on behalf of a project potentially. This is not something that we're just came out of nowhere. We are being approached by different property owners and developers with different types of ideas and programs. This is one of them. The Department of Commerce has the CHIPS grant, which is connecting infrastructure and housing. It is a grant that we receive to help build the infrastructure for Nordic cottages. So there are programs out there, but the city is one that has to apply for it. And you can apply for it on behalf of a private property owner to maybe create, to connect a water main, to upsize sewers. Those are extremely expensive pieces of a project that the city could apply for a grant to support. But this is when the conversation, when we got asked the question, like, well, that's not a decision staff should make, something council should have a policy decision on, but how do we prioritize? Is it the first person who asks us that they want us to apply for a CHIP grant? Is it a certain type of product? So those are the conversations we would have further in workshop 3 if you'd like to dive deeper into that. Because there's quite a few different grant programs out there, but they all have different requirements and eligibility and needs and focuses. So. Yes.
But this only applies to affordable rental housing?
For the CHIPS grant specifically, that's just the example I used. There are some grants that I believe are more open-ended potentially, but most of the grant programs I've researched apply specifically to affordable housing types, income restricted. Yeah. But the CHIPS grant definitely does. Okay. I'm going to go ahead. Oh, of course.
For the grant opportunities, I see what makes sense is that it's city owned and redeveloped site.
Oh, yeah.
So
I didn't
there's
touch on
some
that.
benefit there where there's that city control there, and hopefully maintaining the affordability piece, like the Nordic cottages.
Yeah.
So that's an appealing part. The counterpart is the staff investment.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And this is just where it makes sense to Heather and I as we were working through this. It's something like this could be, we own the property similar to Nordic and we apply for the grant and the private site actually builds it, and or however maybe that happens, whereas we built Nordic ourselves, but that could be the model. They provide the housing, but we provide the land, which I've been told many times over that the land is one of the biggest barriers because the cost of land currently. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, we were going to take a break, but yeah. Okay, so mandatory inclusionary zoning, it requires certain developments required to provide affordable units once they meet a defined threshold, and we can determine what that threshold might be. There's a number of larger cities that have implemented mandatory inclusionary zoning or housing. Seattle has one. It has a full staff to support. It's not small to administer. And there are the general feedback on mandatory inclusionary zoning that it doesn't necessarily produce the product, the housing units. It tends to stall housing development actually. Because it just the affordable units they make the project not pencil. And so there's no reason to move forward. So we wanted to bring it forward as an option, but the general feedback on this program has been fairly negative. I want to be honest about that. But it's especially useful in really strong, larger housing markets. We have a strong market, but it's not necessarily large. So it could be used to require, of course, affordable units, multifamily where it makes sense. Again, it's one of those, if you wanted to dive into it a little further, we can evaluate. We just really weren't quite sure because Poulsbo is so small that it's 4.5 square miles of a strong market. Where do you narrow something like that? But potentially 305, maybe. Yeah. No, because there was no housing there. Anyways.
But typically, when a project gets to a certain level, so it tends to be bigger projects then.
Mm-hmm.
So would that encourage developers then to break a bigger project into two smaller projects then to avoid that
They would
limit?
maybe, but they just wouldn't do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So you would get no housing. That's the feedback I've gotten on this type of program. It works in a place, and then Seattle has the option of pay in lieu fee. Rather than providing it on site, they pay into a fund that gets dispersed elsewhere. So there's different ways to manage it. Of course.
You said it pays into a fund that gets dispersed elsewhere. Is there a control of where that disbursement occurs?
Yes, I don't have all the specifics for the city of Seattle. I just know they have a program. The option is to pay in lieu instead of providing the units on site. And then that I would hope gets spent on affordable housing projects. But I couldn't confirm that. I would hope that's the intent. How it's managed, I could not tell you. Okay. So then we get to affordable housing fee in lieu. This is to my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. It's basically what I just talked about. Thank you. Which is why we layered it the way we did. It allows developers to contribute funds instead of providing on-site affordable units, typical with we can use it with involuntary or mandatory inclusionary type programs. This approach offers a little more flexibility for constrained sites and allows the city to maybe pool resources for strategic investments in housing elsewhere. However, it delays when the affordable housing units are delivered. So you might get a market rate product that pays into affordable housing fund, but it's going to take 20 years to get enough money to build an affordable housing product or something like that. So it delays the arrival of that housing. It is considered moderate staff effort because it builds on existing fee collection and accounting systems rather than creating a full development or housing program. It really is just about adopting really clear guidelines and rules for this type of program. I'm going to let Heather take the show now.
Thank you, Nicole. Great work. We are down to our last 4 programs, and then we're going to talk about what rose up organically at our last meeting, which is increasing our land supply through the UGA swap and annexation. So we'll hit on those 4. We're almost at the point where you all can do some voting. I'm also going to sprinkle in the recommendations from Triple H's ad hoc committee because they spent quite a bit of time. And what was really nice is it dovetails and overlaps with some of the recommendations. So where it makes sense, I'm going to speak to 4 of those. So I appreciate that Councilmember Eckert brought that up earlier and everyone's had a chance to read those recommendations. But before I do that, I'm going to go over what a local housing fund is. It's a mechanism for pooling resources to support housing affordability. This fund can produce housing and strategically be used for gap financing, preservation, land acquisition, or matching grants. Its effectiveness depends on how it is capitalized and governed. The key consideration is whether the city wants a long-term funding pool like we use for our Nordic cottages, or a small pool like a low-interest loan for an ADU, and how it prioritizes housing relative to other needs. For example, if we want to support this with our general fund. And you could say we already have a housing fund with our 1/10 of 1%, but we haven't really designated that fund for that specific purpose. And I know that's something that the ad hoc committee has been helping you all work through. Once these funding sources are identified and acquired, the decision will be made as to who is eligible for those funds. What the ad hoc committee did recommend was two things that could further this housing fund. One, acknowledging that such a fund did exist. The Housing, Health, and Human Services could establish a non-competitive program that provides a structured opportunity to consider housing and shelter proposals for profit and nonprofit agencies. So we have had many people come forward with some really great ideas. And if they wanted to utilize some of this fund, then they could help us decide which programs we want to support. Another recommendation from that committee was to work with planning and economic development to explore an incentive program to create rental ADUs and micro grants or low interest loans for homeowners willing to build and rent their ADUs for deeply affordable households, which we're fortunately getting out of the Rad Park development. But these funds be used for such a project? So this would make sense potentially for lower income at 80% and below, or if you go with a Triple H recommendation, it would be for 60% and below. It could be towards rental or ownership. And the implementation timeframe we thought would be short because it already exists. But the staff effort would be low to moderate because we would need to monitor those programs and actively seek additional funding. Like everything, there's trade-offs. Those funds take time to accumulate, so we may not see those results right away. If we use the Nordic cottage as an example, it took almost 6-7 years, but look what we got out of it. I didn't mean to say 6-7, but I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. I know I have a 15-year-old, so you have to excuse me, and it's late. But it could take, that's about how long it took for us to sorry, I just had to add a little brevity. But it does take time to build up those funds, and it will take time before we see the results of them. So land banking and land donation programs focus on long-term affordability by controlling land before it's developed. It allows the city to acquire, hold, or receive land for housing. We've already had people, City Administrator Gelder and I have already had people in our community that want to come to us and donate land. We have 2 property owners actively seeking for multiple reasons to just do what they can to provide housing in our community. And it's a wonderful opportunity, and we haven't even advertised it. So what would it look like if we were proactive and actually created a program where people could do this? So can we be proactive and create such a program, and would it be under the city's control? And then we will ensure that we do get that long-term affordability. This does also coincide with what the Triple H subcommittee recommended. They did want to establish a land bank program that encourages private and corporate donations for the purpose of housing or shelter. And like anything else, it's going to take some time and staff effort. But I did want to give an example of a city similar in size to Poulsbo that has established a land donation and land banking program, which is the city of Bothell. And they've donated a city-owned property to a local church to be developed into affordable rental housing and community space. So this is something we could implement. And we, like I said, we already have people coming to us requesting. And like these other programs, one of the things we have to consider that's a little unique about this is sometimes when we accept land, we need to make sure it's not constrained. We need to ensure that there's no residual pollutants that we may have to clean up. So there are some upfront costs that we may have to take on, as we saw when we were going to accept land from the county, the 180 DNR land acres. No land is free. So there are some costs once we take this on, and then we would need to maintain that land, make sure it's mowed, etc. Something to consider. Yes.
But that land donations could only be used for low income housing, right?
That would be the agreement that we would make, but assumably, yes, that was what we would say for the house, for the land that we receive.
I'm just thinking, I've learned a little bit from the Cafe Oasis thing about we can't have gifts. The public can't gift land except for use for the poor and the needy. And I
I
know
don't know the ins and outs of that. I do wonder if there would be an opportunity for some market rate and affordable units potentially. I don't know if that precludes that or not. So I'd have to look a little more.
Mr. Ecker? Yeah, I was just, so with this one and the last one, and when I sat down with Kim, because the very first recommendation from the ad hoc committee was prioritizing permanent step housing. And so that was kind of the start of our conversation. Because the definition of permanent step housing, the way it's been presented to us as a group, and then it's at some of the breakout sessions I've been with AWC events and all, Commerce focuses on what Kim and I figured out eventually, is a part of the definition. It's not the whole definition. They focus on part of it that steers permanent supportive housing to specifically those with behavioral issues and generally substance abuse issues. Permanent supportive housing isn't limited to them but that's where Commerce takes us all the time. So I was under the impression that was the limit. And what we talked about was more in senior housing. So in the last two of these, and it's just my opinion and I'm throwing it out now because I'll forget otherwise, our known Poulsbo community that needs help, needs us to focus on is our seniors. It's the large group of folks that we know we have in our community right now who have concerns now and into the future, that I think if we look at these last two, that needs to be maybe not the number one priority, but at least one of the number ones. It needs to be at the top of it, because if nothing else, it helps keep seniors from ending up homeless. It helps seniors move from homes that they're currently in that maybe they don't need anymore. They're too big. They don't, and they move into we help them move into housing that's more appropriate to where they are in life, which then opens up those other houses to others. So as I looked at those two and I talked this through with Kim, that's where my thoughts went, is our senior community and how do we use those two to tailor to help that community, which then has the ripple effect on others.
Thank you, Councilmember Eckert. I do see that Kim is on. Kim, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, thank you, Heather. Your presentation is excellent and represents the thoughts of the committee really well. I'm just here in case any council members want to take a slightly deeper dive into the thoughts of the committee or any specific recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate that. And exactly what you're talking about, Councilmember Eckert, is what we can dive into. If you decide to choose that policy, then we can decide which targeted income groups or senior level that we want to have that housing provided for. So it's perfect. I have one more program. Preservation, two more, almost done. This is preservation and acquisition program. Up to this point tonight, most of our tools have focused on encouraging new housing production, making it easier and more feasible for new projects to pencil. Preservation and acquisition programs take a different approach. Instead of asking, how do we build more housing, these programs focus on how do we avoid losing the housing we already have. And we've seen multiple communities at the risk of being lost that our council has stepped in, potentially going to market rates such as our Wood Creek apartments and potentially our Hostmark apartments. So this is a tool that is fundamentally about having the timing and the readiness. We need the opportunity to preserve housing and we need to be able to do it quickly. When a property goes on the market, decisions often need to be made in weeks and not years. So if we have this funding source available for this potential, we could likely move when these projects move forward. Yes, please.
Are there some preservation and acquisition programs that are grant-based or require a grant or? Because I thought there were some programs out there that help to support that movement of preservation of affordable homes.
Yes, there are some programs. We don't have any of those currently, but we could strive for those type of grant programs for this specific cause.
Could I just say, for some of those programs, right, there are other organizations that are probably better positioned than the city to actually take advantage of those. So when we partner, we have a housing authority that is our, basically, they have historically for the past several years been really focused on preservation as opposed to the creation, and finally are turning the corner where they can focus on a little bit more creation as well.
And I see, Kim, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that question, Councilmember Crowe. I would just add that even in a really tough budget cycle in Olympia, there seems to be some state housing preservation funds that continue to be available, even when all other programs seem to be very unstable. So I will just second something that Administrator Rob just said. I think that if we were to partner with a housing authority or another partner, we'd probably be in a pretty good position to ask for some state preservation funding.
Thank you, Kim. And Kim, it's nice to have you back again because this leads right into one of the goals of the Triple H committee, which was to establish a rental assistance program in cooperation with Fishline. So thank you, Fishline, for being here. That builds on existing rental assistance efforts. And I did want to provide an example that might be familiar to you all that was performed by Housing Kitsap, and is the Times Squares Apartments in Kingston. Housing Kitsap, the local housing authority nonprofit, acquired existing multifamily properties to preserve them as affordable housing. And there's 16 low-income senior units and people with disabilities that were purchased with money from Kitsap County's community investment in affordable housing. So that just is a recent effort and example. But because grants are going to be a part of this, and acquiring those grants and partnerships are going to be a part of this, the implementation timeframe could be long and staff effort could be moderate. And we can choose which populations we want to target with this tool. I'm not going to dive in these because they're not so different than what we've spoken to before that are some of the considerations. And our yes.
Allow me to set the table and you can catch a breath for a moment.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job. So as most of you are aware, at the conclusion of the series of workshops in March, I'll be declaring and filling a Mayor's Blue Ribbon Commission on public-private partnership solutions for affordable housing. And here's the key: ownership. And to keep it very simple, it's an exploratory to see if the private sector working with the public sector can arrive at a point where it's incentivized by market conditions to build housing of its own volition. And is it profitable enough? And it's going to take all the parties at the table. And my specific inquiry, and I'm prepared to see it be a failure, right? You take any risk, you have to embrace the risk of failure, is to take the fine work that our planning department did, Nicole and Heather, leading the county in the 4 cities on accessory dwelling units, mother-in-law apartments, which now the 6 presets are available, 700 to 1,000 square feet in various configurations. The simple idea here is to aggregate those into clusters of up to 12 with a common courtyard as a single construction, but condominiumized ownership, so that people are buying these very small cottages, but own them and have the opportunity for equity and building some net worth and having a stake in the community through home ownership. And by staying 12, currently state law has the condominium liability law captured, and a ceiling that hasn't existed for more than a few decades and has completely stymied condominium type townhouse development. So here's just one example, then I'll be quiet. And this commission will be exploring it with all the parties at the table. We heard in the first workshop that our current fee structure is such that $53,000 per construction unit. That's why everything's ending up with these larger units and at the high end of the market. But if these could be built in aggregate, and it remains to be seen, could that fee apply to all 12 at once? And other cost reductions, including the ADUs, have reduced impact and hookup fees. So it could be that the market will reject that because there's too thin of a return on investment. But that will be the object of the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Commission, which will be announced and seated toward the end of May. And we corresponded the timing with the workshops and capacity of staff to assist that with the city administrator.
So what I hear is nobody waste your $20 chip in the survey on this one because Ed's going to do it anyway. So wait, for the very interested, don't anybody use your $20. Don't anybody use not very interested on this because he's already going to do it. So we get to pick an extra one on the rest of the list. For them to do.
I kindly disagree. I would love only if
Your honest feedback.
and it will help us with the managing the other priorities. So I think it'll be really helpful. This is what's beautiful about this program is you all have experience in this already. That Nordic Cottages wouldn't have happened. It was a public and private partnership. This isn't it where we have a living example of it using our own city-owned land, partnering with Housing Kitsap and the local church to provide the parking. So this is something that we've lived through as a city. It is the most intentional and hands-on way to influence our housing outcomes. And we haven't targeted towards this ownership model. So there's great opportunity here for the city to continue to be an active participant in housing outcomes. I think you all understand this program pretty well, so I'm going to move forward. This can target lower incomes, but if we proceed with this Blue Ribbon Commission, we aren't limited by this 80% and below. This can go up to a higher income threshold, and that's something that can be decided on by council. It can do mixed income, is which I kind of envision with some of what you're describing, which can outlend to some market rate and some affordable. How quickly this happens depends. We do have some lands available and we do have potentially some interested parties to make this happen, and staff effort could be moderate. And I'm going to skip over this because you all have lived and breathed it in terms of partnerships and knowing there's legal review and extensive coordination on these type of efforts, and it could be a longer timeline. So I'm going to just quickly talk about annexation and the UGA swap because I want to make sure you all understand it. So I'm just going to brief history lesson here, I promise. So our urban growth area, it's been around since 2002. It's been here for a long time. We've been annexing land in over time. Right now we have about 350 acres of land, and 72 of those acres are vacant, with 300 acres partially utilized or underdeveloped. Compared to our full city limits, the UJ is just 18% of our full city limits. And what we found after analyzing these lands is some of them really should be in the county in terms of their critical areas and their buildability or lack thereof. And there's some land that's actually within the county that's well suited to be within the city. And so the first thing we would propose doing is really swapping out those lands. And it needs to be a like for like in terms of acreage. And this is a county-led process, and we would be partnering. The county needs to want to do this. And there was a time where the county was very interested. That's actually where Rob and I first worked together, because the county was interested in doing this. And I think it's really a capacity thing for them. Those lands have already been identified, but it is going to take time. You know, some people don't want to be in city limits, and some people don't want to leave the county. And so it is going to be staff intensive. But the benefit of that is we will have more developable land. And if it's a supply supply and demand that's leading to some of this problem that we're having with our housing shortage and housing costs, we could potentially have more buildable land. So that would be the first step, is proceeding with the swap. And then from there, we can move into at some point fully annexing in that land. But bringing the land in doesn't mean it's just ours. We have to service that land. So there's going to be a lot of capital facility coordination. We need to make sure that we have the right sewer and the water capacity. But right now, when someone comes in and they're in the UG and they want to develop, they need to show that they have the potential to accommodate all the housing that they can build under our current zoning, but they can still only build one house because they're on septic and they can't actually supply the housing that they're allowed under zoning, but they have to show us that in the future that they can. And so people just aren't building. We've only had about 9 new residences since 2020 within our UGA, and we have quite a bit of land available. So a lot of coordination would need to happen. This would be a long game. But the benefit is there's a new tool that we could utilize. Right now, to come into the city, you have to agree basically through a petition method that you want to come in, but we can, through a city-county partnership, annex that land in it, and without necessarily having those in agreement to come into city, it's still going to mean that it's going to be an arduous process with lots of communication, and we'd have to have the appetite. But let me quickly say what happens once we have that land. Then we have the ability to say, and I've heard from council members, so I'll just use examples, not saying this is what we want to do, but I have had council members say, could there be a mobile home park land designation in that area? Because it's, maybe lends better to that type of use, or could we focus it towards infill development? So we can make some of those decisions, and that development of type of housing could be built in those annexed areas and adjoining areas.
So
Yes.
when you're talking annexation, are you talking of our UGA already or of county land that's not in our UGA?
Only if you're swapping it, would it be county land that's not in our UGA? And then we would annex in the swap.
So not
Taking in
new
more,
county
not
land
new.
that's completely
Not at this time. We don't,
expanding our footprint.
not expanding.
Two-step
please.
process. You want to swap and rebalance. Then you want to focus on annexation.
I just wasn't sure if we were this was talking about separate from UGA swap, basically growing Poulsbo from the county.
We can't grow yet until we show that we can't meet our growth capacity. And right now we have the capacity to accommodate the growth. Yes. Yes. So that might be in 5 years, 10 years that we have that discussion.
What do you guys think?
Yes.
Probably 100 questions, but it is 8:30, so I'm only going to get one. And he's still here. Mr. Baker brought up a request. Which one of those does it fit in here? Just so I'm clear, it sounded like he was going to go after state grants, but I can't.
A fee reduction and deferral program was the one that he spoke to directly this
But he
evening.
mentioned that it would leverage some state grants. I don't. So it sounded like it fits in 2 pieces. Sorry,
That's okay.
It was brought up by 2 of them. I just want to.
Absolutely. I appreciate you asking that. The one we spoke specifically to was the fee reduction. I'm sure if there was additional fundings available through a local housing fund and grant, but that's not what you spoke to. Did we want to ask Mr. Baker to speak to that?
My colleagues, I just want to make sure we're clear on the 2 public comments we got earlier tonight. Which one is these? It was fee deferral, but I thought you said something about that could be used as the match for a grant.
You want to come to the podium?
Mr. Baker, if you would come to the
Sorry.
podium, please.
Sorry, I just.
Invited by the council to speak, I'll note for the record.
Yes, so low-income housing tax credits are a state-based resource that it's a competitive process that you have to apply for to gain, kind of like the Department of Commerce Housing Trust Fund. To be competitive for that resource, they ask that the local municipality it kind of has their own skin in the game. And so that typically ends up being about 5% of the total development cost. And then the state resource that you would then apply for and win would be about 40. So it's about an 8-to-1 match.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity.
Mr. Tabor?
I'm just noting that Kim has her hand.
Kim, go ahead.
Thank you. Just in additional response to Councilmember Newell, we have no process in place to consider a request from somebody like Mr. Baker to use our limited tax funds. The Affordable Housing Task Force first recommendation is to create some sort of process and review board. So when people like Mr. Baker would like to use our city funds to leverage for a larger project, there's a way to do that that's properly noticed and is a fair process. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim, for that, because it sounded like there was a couple different ways we could match. I guess just from that standpoint, and again, we are late. The tools are complex. So the other piece of this is, and we, I've got a copy of the letter, and you and I exchanged notes about the H3 recommendations. There appears to be some overlap, but this is strategies for specific low income. Your strategies, I'm asking for clarification. Some of these other ones are broader range than the specific pieces that we're looking at. While there is overlap, it's not, it could be a yes and not an either or.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And this isn't meant, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, right? This is really about what are those dials that we as a city, as a jurisdiction, you'd be here a little bit longer, can turn, right? It can tweak those dials. If you were a developer and more, then you are plugging into those other statewide programs, et cetera, that aren't going to be illustrated here as well. Thank you.
And again, the reason we initiated this workshop series is because staff, including Kim and her department, are being asked a lot of questions about these type of tools and programs. And it's really not something we can do in a silo. And so we really needed to come to you and say, what would you want to do as a city council? And can you give us direction on which programs and incentives we should investigate further and potentially entertain these questions and ideas? We don't know. So that's where we came to you to get your feedback. Again, moving forward, I think in summary, I won't go back to the slide. There is no single program or incentive that works. Everything I've researched, everything I've read, it's about stacking different incentives in specific locations and really encouraging and focusing, especially for a city the size of Poulsbo. We're not, 4.5 square miles. We have limited land and resources. So there is no one size fits all. We'll have to really think hard about these incentives and programs that you want us to evaluate further. And again, it's not exhaustive. There was a couple items we took out because after evaluating a little more, it's just not viable for a city our size to even entertain that idea. If we wanted to do a more exhaustive list, we would be here for about 8 to 20 workshops potentially at this length. Nobody wants to do that. Except for one.
Last questions for Nicole and Heather. And Gary, you have anything left up there?
Yeah, I have a question. This is kind of big picture, but this chart talks about who it helps. And I understand how a lot of these strategies would help. This says getting below helping people at 80% AMI or below. I could see that happening quite effectively on the rental market. I mean, I'm somewhat speaking to those my colleagues who have a little more knowledge of real estate than I do, but I'm a little skeptical that we're talking about ownership at that level. Are we? I mean, AMI is 95,000 a year. So
No, AMI is
no.
129. Is it
125?
125 is what I thought. 123.
Okay, so can I ask is it based off city limit data or is it?
It's the Silverdale Bremerton area median income.
Okay, because when you Google AMI for 98370, it's 109,000.
Right.
I mean,
I just looked it up and it said 95, but
I try and
that's for just the city limits.
So it's for I just looked it up and it's 123, 125. That's the number that
For the KITS app.
It's the Silverdale Bremerton metropolitan area.
Right.
Yeah, that's the standard we use for affordable housing. It's codified. Yes, thank you.
But I I'm thinking about what the financiers are looking at
Mhm.
for giving out mortgages, and it's much, much higher. And I'm sort of skeptical that we're going to create housing that people below that AMI are going to become readily competitive for.
It could be a matter of stacking different incentives that make it pencil. There is no one program that will create ownership options other than maybe a robust housing fund.
And it has to do with housing type. So when I was stationed at Fort Meade, in order to buy a house, I bought a townhouse that was 35 miles away from base. I drove, and it was literally, you have Baltimore and DC. Fort Meade is on a direct line between them. My house was 90 degrees off of that line, straight out into the countryside. And I drove 45 minutes every day. That was as close to where I worked that I could buy a house. And it was a townhouse, and it was,
I understand.
Yeah.
I totally, but we can't do that within the city limits.
Right. Yeah. So some of it gets into the duplexes, triplexes, like we'll get into that. Yeah.
It's the type of units.
Yeah.
that could potentially be more
some of
affordable.
it gets into different housing types.
Inherently more affordable.
We're approaching 20 to 9, so let's wrap up this phase of questions. I also want to acknowledge the tremendous work of Heather and Nicole. Hopefully for workshop number 3, we'll have a little earlier start. Take advantage of those breaks you gave us, Nicole. But you streamlined the breaks really well,
printed
so
out.
we appreciate that. Are there any last questions from council on?
We do need council to vote. So that's the live voting that you have. I have 2 out of the 7 who have responded. I'm not sure if Gary's still with us. Yeah. And this will give us direction for what to bring forward. Again, this is anonymous. And it does not,
I'm voting now.
thank you. It doesn't bind us for the next 20 years. It just gives staff some direction, which we really appreciate.
And we're not supposed to just say very interested on everything.
You
So
can, that's your choice.
Have you run these through the planning commission?
No.
We did talk about that, but we have not taken this workshop series yet to the planning commission because we know ultimately the planning commission will be chewing on the policy decisions that you all recommend. For example, like you all recommended MFTE, and so that went through the planning commission. So, but we have
Yep.
not taken all these through the planning commission.
Okay, thank you.
Keeping in mind that many of these programs are not required to go to planning commission.
I'm just,
So
they focus on housing and development more than we do. I just was asking the question. It seemed like a logical venue to potentially get some feedback on what they think.
Doug, they told you what they were gonna do last.
assume that everyone will vote sometime tonight and we will evaluate those results tomorrow. Okay. As long as you get to it before I get to the office tomorrow morning, I will be happy.
Did you vote here?
We have a voting assignment here, and are there any last questions or clarifications before we wrap up the Affordable Housing Series 2? Doug?
I just want to note there's only one way to reliably increase revenue and decrease housing prices, and that's by building a nuclear waste treatment facility right in downtown Poulsbo. So just saying.
Now I know it's getting late because we're glowing with
Forgot that
expectations.
option on the list.
Heather and Nicole, thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for your attention and your great questions.
And you'll have the test results.
Results.
We are moving on to, before we take continued public comment, and there might be a little bit tonight, this late, as it may be, questions and concerns of the council. I'll start with Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Might as well use this time since I tried to get rid of it.
Back there.
I would love to hear more conversation amongst us or at a future workshop about the income side of this. We had some discrepancies on AMI numbers and these percentages, like how do these pencil out for actual ownership as opposed to the rental market side of this. These strategies are for both sides of the market, but I really want to see how we're getting to those numbers. So that's not a particular request, just those are conversations I hope to have in the future.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Crowe, any questions, concerns, comments? None. Mr. Newell? No comments. Mr. Eckert?
Yeah, so I was just gonna bring up, we have the AWC has the Wasili program, which is, a training program. It's meant for a comprehensive look in training and civility for elected leaders. Up till now, the first 2 years, the first 2 cohorts, it was spread out over 6 weeks. So it was a couple days over 6 weeks. It was a fairly intensive time commitment. What the education committee discussed at city action days, what they're planning is they're going to try to cut that down to potentially just 2 sessions. One would be combined with the annual conference, and then one other one that would be a long weekend at UW. I'm trying to get confirmation if that's going to occur with this cohort. I would like to sign up for it, to be part of it, but they want you to come with folks with your cohort established. So if any of the rest of the council is interested in signing up for that program, on the understanding that it's the shorter timeline, not the 6 different sessions. What I was also thinking is, once I get confirmation, was reaching out to the Port Orchard Council and seeing if any of them are welcome. They usually want the cohort to be 3 to 4 folks. So just think about that. The information is on the AWC website, what it entails. And Ashley over at Bainbridge, actually 3 Bainbridge council members, but Ashley, if you have any questions about what it's like, she can talk to you about the program, the benefits, what it was about.
I might suggest, Rick, that you get together with City Clerk Rhiannon Fernandez, and she can put out the link or the specific information both to the council as a whole here, and she could copy the other cities to hear back.
Yeah, I'm trying to reach out to Carly and Heidi right now to see if the shortened schedule is actually going through first, because I don't want to put it out on that and then we don't do that, because I couldn't sign up if it was still 6 weeks.
Mr. Tabor?
How can I help you?
Questions? None. And Ms. Livedall is
No.
she's coming.
No, super.
While
super
she's
helpful.
coming back, I didn't mean to rush her. Where we started the meeting hours ago, you have in your council box tonight from the city clerk reference to AWC on something much shorter and easier to do. 1 hour during your lunch hour remotely, a week from Thursday, on procedure and Robert's Rules of Order that could assist us in streamlining and clarity in our questions and concerns off the dais. Britt, any questions or comments for tonight?
Not tonight.
And on that note, I'm going to call for, does Gary have his hand up?
No, nothing further from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McVeigh. I'm now going to call for public comment. Anyone here? Welcome to come to the podium. If you'd give us your name and place of residence, and you have up to 3 minutes to address us. And I anticipated there might be a few comments.
Yes, hi. Jamie Clough, Government Affairs Director with the Kitsap Building Association, resident of Bremerton. Just want to say thank you all so much for continuing this conversation. Nicole, Heather, you guys did a fantastic job walking through these programs and incentives. We at the KBA stand as a resource for you guys. So if you have any questions about any of these specific programs or incentives that were mentioned, want to get input from the developer side, I am here for you guys. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and we can facilitate those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Calling for public comment. No, that's correct. I knew there would be some.
No singing. Good evening, everyone. Jake Carter, resident of Bremerton, Director of Construction for Habitat for Humanity of Kitsap County. Would love to talk about home ownership opportunities. That is what we do for everyone below 80% AMI. So great conversations here. Again, to echo, I'm actually on the board of the KBA as well. What Jamie said, tremendous kudos to Heather and her team for this. We've got a lot of challenges, right, in Kitsap for housing, rental, and home ownership. Home ownership is very difficult to do. We need a lot of support, public support, donations, volunteers, right? That's how we we build a lot of our homes. So yeah, targeted tools, broad-based tools, we've got to look at everything. A couple things that I'll just echo on from that. Parking is a significant barrier. It can be very well done, especially for small scale development, infill development, cottage communities, where it makes sense, right? You may not do that for large multifamily rental communities, but leverage the hard work of getting the pre-approved ADU plans and make it easier to build. Whatever we can do, right? That opens up more opportunities for current homeowners to build, right? Not developers, right? And so we are a developer, we're a nonprofit. Not all developers are out there just trying to, rake in all the money. So parking, MFTE for 20-year for homeownership, that is a direct benefit to the homeowner. There's no pass through, right? So we are entering our next life cycle, right? We've been around 30 years, built 107 homes in Kitsap County. I haven't been there that long, obviously. But we're implementing ground lease ownership, right? So we will have, our organization will retain ownership of the land, much like what HRB does on the island, and then sell those homes. So it is permanently affordable, right? And so that MFTE would be a direct benefit to that homeowner. There would be no pass through. They would save on their property taxes. So that could be immensely impactful to the citizens of Poulsbo. So I wanted to highlight that one as well. So those are a couple things. And lastly, fee reductions, Kitsap County, where we're currently building most of our homes. We have fee waivers. We work with the school district and Public Works fee waivers. That saves us $12,000 a home. That's a lot of money. Cash flow for what we're doing, that's very significant. So those are three options for home ownership that I wanted to mention. So thank you all for the great work, and looking forward to getting to know you all as we start on the ADU at Robb Park.
Calling for public comment. If you would come to the podium, you have up to 3 minutes. State your name and place of residence.
We're there.
I think we're there. I'll call last time for public comment and not seeing anything else for the good of the order. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
And here we don't do roll call. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're adjourned.